Right, 27. All right, and recording has started, so that's good. Okay, well, if I'm sure more people will join. We're up to 28 at the moment. So this is the Principal Designer Working Group 17. We have a agenda which hopefully everybody's had sight of. If I could ask if people could go off video, because it tends to restrict the bandwidth, if that's at all possible, Paul. Which is very good. Bit of advertising there from Paul, I see, with WSP in the background there. Very good.
Okay.
You pay extra for that, you know. But so if I could hand over to Richard for the safety mode, and then we'll do a welcome as well, and quickly run through attendees on the call.
Yes, good morning, everybody. Welcome, as Doug said, to the 17th event of the Principal Designers Working Group. Doug and I had sort of conversation last week about, the agenda, because it keeps changing, and can you do the safety moment or the sort of well-being moment? And I was just thinking about various things. And then on Tuesday is the day that my cleaner comes. My cleaner's a nice lady. She was selected by my daughter for me because she likes dogs. So the most important thing was because I used to go to work once. I used to go to an office on a train. I'll drive to the office in Bristol. And so she'd let the dog off and look after her. She's deaf. She's a lovely lady. She's not always that good at cleaning. I think her mind wanders slightly, but she's deaf. And I was on a marathon call from 8 till about 4:30, various calls. But there was one that I was on in the afternoon, so I was quite busy in the study. And normally when she comes, I go outside or go for a walk or go for a drive and make calls that way, not whilst driving, of course. And she knocked on the study door about 4:30 and she said, "Richard, my car won't start." I thought, oh, okay. And we normally communicate just sort of face to face because she lip reads, or if I'm not around, I write notes for her. So I had to go out into the driveway and wanted to jump start a car. And it's difficult, different dimension, because you have to face somebody and talk to somebody whilst trying to connect up the leads and then start the car. So I explained to her that I wanted to take her key out of the ignition and put it onto the roof of the car, just as a precaution, because I didn't want any miscommunication, because I once saw a battery blow up once being jump started. So I wear big gloves and safety glasses and do all the business and start the cars up, etc. And it's quite humbling when you're dealing with somebody who is deaf. And then I was talking to her about how she coped with going out and about. And she's actually got a little industry set up now, making masks. And she makes masks for people who lip read. So there's a vision panel in the mask. And I think I never thought about it before. But I just thought I'd like to share that with you, that sometimes it's quite humbling when people do have a disability, a limitation, whether it be hearing. Most men are deaf at weekends, apparently, from Friday till Monday morning. But just having to communicate with somebody who is totally reliant upon lip reading whilst doing an activity where, you'd normally shout, turn the ignition on, turn the ignition off, etc. You can't do that. So you have to have a totally different strategy. So hopefully her car got her home in one piece. She never texted me back to say she didn't, but I just thought I'd share that with you. Thank you. Speak to me, Doug.
Sorry, I was on mute there. Sorry, thank you.
That was a really good one. That's really thought-provoking, that, Richard. Yeah, impressed. That's a real good one. I think I can use that a little bit further.
It is, because jump starting a car is potentially hazardous enough, but when somebody has a limitation, I think a limitation is better word than disability. It makes you think differently, and it comes down to a lot of the incidents we have. Sometimes it's miscommunication, isn't it? As we make assumptions.
Yeah, that's exactly what we were talking about on the hub call yesterday morning, wasn't it? Some of the TM issues which were based around communication failures in one form or another.
Okay.
And yeah,
Doug's going to do the introductions in a minute. We do actually need to have a bit of Teams discipline. So as Doug said, can you be off camera? Can you try and be on mute to minimise background noise. But we want people to talk because that's one of the huge benefits of this group, isn't it, Pav? And what we'd like people to do, if you look on your toolbar, there is a hand, and you can put your hand up. There's also the conversation, so people can put comments in here, etc. And I see Liz Bennett's joined us. So, you know, there are various ways we can all communicate. And Pav's put his hand up just to prove it works. So, Pav, have you actually got something sensible to say, or you just wanted to test the system?
Be sensible related to your topic. On LTC, we've started the process of actually looking at all of the users that we've got, and I'm not really sure. And this is an action to start off with, an action that we need a schedule of which are the key users, including deaf people, elderly people. I know we normally contact disabled people, but we need to start to focus our designs on the human factors associated with our users. So fair enough, in the HE strategies, it does talk about all users, but do we really design for them? Is the bit of a challenge that I've actually got. And then do we have a list of the organisations that we contact to get feedback and to actually have a conversation with?
No, it's a good point. I know on a big rail project I did many years ago, we did actually have people from you know, various different groups like that to be engaged with all the pedestrian routes, etc., and how we were going to cope in an emergency when we were simulating that. But yeah, it's a good point. Thank you, Pav. And thank you, Liz, for your comments as well about your son. Doug, would you like to get the introductions?
Okay, we'll do. Yes. So we currently have 34 on the call, so I'll just run down the call list. So myself, Doug Potter, I'm a Principal Designer Manager with Arcadis. We then have Phil Sams. If you'd like to introduce yourself.
Yes, hello, morning everybody. Phil Sams, I'm the Engineering Manager with Kia in Area 3 on the ASC contract.
Okay, thank you. And Abby Featherstone.
Yeah, hi, I'm Abby Featherstone. I'm the Head of Design and Technical Assurance at Connect Plus Services on the M25.
Thank you. And Ali Chowdhury.
Yeah, Ali Chowdhury, Engineering Manager at Galliford Drive and Designer on A47 East.
Thank you. Andrew Finch.
Yes, Andrew Finch Jacobs. So I'm also on the SCSLG working group for safety by design, which I'll come on to later, and have been involved with the whole life design working group, task group for this group. Thanks, Doug.
Okay, thank you, Andrew. Tom Bolton.
Hi, I'm Tom Bolton. I'm lead PD for Amy on the Area 10 and 13 DSC contracts, just taken over from Mark Reardon.
Okay, thank you, Tom. Nick Boyle.
Nick Boyle, Technical Director, Balfour Beatty. I also run a similar forum called Safety by Design and Engineering, which I've been running for the last 11 years every quarter. Next meeting this afternoon.
Okay, thank you, Nick. And Claire Brown.
Hi, I'm Claire Brown. I work for BAM Nuttall and I'm the safety lead on the routes to market schemes in the Midlands and South East.
Thank you. David Lum.
Sorry, I'm on. Yeah, hi, it's David Lum. I'm the regional the business partner for health and safety for RIP North within HE.
Thank you. Elizabeth Bennett.
Hi, I'm Liz Bennett, fellow of the Civils, work in safety training mainly, chair the Design for Health task group.
Thank you. Ed French.
Ed French, with Arcadis. I'm a member of the Principal Designer team. Principal role at the moment is with HS2, also involved on the technical assurance project.
Thank you, Ed. You were a bit faint there, but I think we got that. Tim.
Hello, Tim Bowers.
Hi, Tim Goddard.
Sorry, Tim.
You go, Tim.
Okay, thank you. Tim Bowes from Atkins, Principal Designer for the A14 project currently.
Okay, it's all right. Tim Goddard.
Tim Goddard, Arcadis, Principal Design Manager, working on the technical assurance schemes, M6 and M4 major projects.
Katie Harmon.
Katie Harmon, Harrows England, Regional Health and Safety Manager for Yorkshire and the North East.
Okay, Sam Hogan.
Sam Hogan, Balfour BT, Engineering Manager on the A63 and Principal Designer on the A63, A57 and A19.
Okay, thank you. Ian Scott.
Morning, I'm the Programme Lead for Complex Infrastructure Programme in Highways England. But I struggle with that, but it's the morning.
Thank you, Ian. Jamie Darling.
Hi, so Jamie Darling from Geotechnical Engineering. So I'm sort of bid and business development manager for major projects. So apologies if I'm a little bit quiet today. I'm currently looking after my 13-month-old daughter, so she's going to be rolling around in the background. So I'll keep myself on mute if that's okay.
Okay, thank you. Jim Todd.
Hello, Jim Todd from Tony G's, Temporary Works Specialist and also Director of the Temporary Works Forum.
Thank you, Jim. Jim Gallagher.
It's Jim Gallagher. I'm with Highways England, SES, and I deal mainly with structural standards. Thanks.
Thank you, Jim. John Webster.
Morning, John Webster, Key Highways, currently Principal Designer on for the RDP schemes that Key Highways is delivering.
Okay, thank you. Ian Joins.
Good morning, everybody. My name's Ian Joins. I work for Jacobs, Principal Designer, CDMA, and I'm about to start on the A34 improvements, formerly Oxcam.
Thank you. Mark Lamport.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Mark Lamport from Arcadis. I'm the Principal Designer, Team Manager, Team Lead on the M4 Smart Motorway, and I also lead the CDM team for the Arcadis Highways business.
Thank you. Malcolm Shaw.
Good morning, everyone. Malcolm Shaw from Arup. I'm the Principal Designer Lead on the Smart Motorway Junction, M1 Junction 13 to 16 on behalf of Amy Arup Joint Venture. Thank you.
Thank you, Malcolm. Mark Bridges.
Yeah, morning, Mark Bridges. I'm the Health and Safety Lead for Galliford Tribe, and I'm joining you this morning as in my capacity as Chair of the Highway Safety Hub Group.
Thank you, Mark. Nicola Brediga.
Hi, I'm Nicola Bidiga, Chief Engineer on M25 DBFO.
Okay, thank you. Always, Khan. We got Always on. Oh, yeah. Nope. Still on mute. Come in, Always. Okay, I will move on. We've got Paul Brown.
Morning, Paul Brown, Associate at WSP.
Okay, thank you. Pavan and well, Pav, do you want to introduce yourself again? I think.
Hello, my name is Pav Singh. Work for Mark Lamport in the Arcadis team. I look after the Lower Thames Crossing as Principal Designer Manager. Thank you.
Okay. Rob Butcher.
Morning all. Rob Butcher from Jacobs. I'm a CDM advisor and principal designer support to the RIP East schemes we have. Partnering with Costain actually now. It's good. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Roger Swainston.
Yeah, morning. Roger Swainston from Jacobs, principal designer lead, but similar to Rob, I'm CDM advisor to our RDP North schemes, partnering with Costain.
Okay, thanks, Roger. Simon Wilkinson.
Morning, Simon Wilkinson, Regional Director with the ACOM, Highways England schemes and various schemes for other clients as Principal Designer.
Okay, thank you. Sullivan.
Hi, good morning. I work as an associate in WSB and also Health and Safety Champions for Highways North.
Okay, thank you. Tom Merritt.
Morning, Tom Berry, Health and Safety Lead for the Smart Motorways Programme in Highways England.
Thank you. Tim, I think we've already done Tim. Lewis, Tony Lewis, sorry.
Good morning, Tony Lewis of Costain, currently Principal Designer for the RDP North schemes.
Thanks, Tony. And finally, but not least, Toria.
Good morning, I'm Toria Thomas from Arup, Principal Designer Lead on the A417 Missing Link project and chairing the Eliminating Risk from the Outset task group. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Toria. Okay, so moving on to item 2 on the agenda, we have an update from Ian on the new CDM delivery process and procedures, which Ian has previously presented on, but is now going to give us an update as we move to them going live in the near future. So over to you, Ian, if that's okay.
Thanks, Doug. Yeah, I think most of you that are on the call have been party to my presentations over the last, well, I think it's nearly a year now since I started this, 18 months since I started the project. We've pretty much completed all the documentation. It's been sent off to be formatted by our partner, GINCOM. Some of you might be aware of GINCOM. They make everything slightly interactive, so it's not an old-fashioned piece of paper. It's online, it's interactive, it's intuitive. So that allows anybody within our business to access that and play around with it once it's up and running. I've had the first set of documents through that my team, including the likes of Tom and David and Richard, have all seen and fed back to me on. So now they've been passed off. We're looking for a second bunch of documents to come through to us, perhaps within the next 2 weeks. Once they're done, we are still in line for a September release at the minute. So that's, I think it's mid-September. So there'll be, in August, I believe there is going to be a bit of information that I'll be able to share with you with regards to rollout. That rollout will predominantly with our own HE people. But of course, as we roll this out, I would like to share that at that time with this group as well. So it's a mid-September rollout. Any other change, I will keep you updated. Okay. That's about it, Doug. Thanks. I'll keep you on track today.
Well, yeah, we're quite way ahead of program. I think there were a number of we'd had a prior discussion, particularly around the health and safety file, and I think there was a little bit of concern from certainly some of the smart motorway contracts and that Tim's been working with in terms of the health and safety file structure, and the notional structure of a handover manual split into 7 volumes, with the health and safety file being volume 2. Tim, do you want to expand on your concerns there?
Yeah, we've currently progressed on the M6 and the M4, but I'm specifically dealing with the M6 handover that's sort of imminent. It's within the next sort of 6 to 8 weeks, and we've currently progressed with the handover setup basically being the volumes 1 to 7. And as we're nearing the end, Balfours have actually come back and said, well, one of our colleagues is undertaking the handover in line with 105, and we're obviously doing it with regards to this proposed setup. Have we got any confirmation that this is acceptable? Because we don't want to get to the sort of the 11th hour and be told, no, it's got to be back in the old format because this one isn't currently adopted.
Mr. Merry can answer that question, I think.
Yeah. I think I'd want to have a specific conversation about that one, but from my perspective, I'm not wedded to the 105 bit. So as long as the key information's in there,
yeah,
that's what
it pretty much follows that. Yeah, within the setups.
So I think it's probably worth us having a specific conversation offline just to iron out any kinks on this one.
Okay, that's fine.
Okay, thank you. Pav has got his hand up.
So I'm having a few problems with key sort of health and safety type issues. So I'm currently doing a site asbestos management plan. I can't find where the data of Highways England's asbestos information actually goes to, and I'm struggling. So this relates to the health and safety file, but it's relating to pre-construction information as well. So since Highways England have transferred to a different SharePoint, I'm struggling with what they call ADMM, Asset Data Management. Where do we actually send the information to? What format do we need to send the information to Highways England? And in particular, just to give you an example, asbestos information for soils, I don't know what's actually happened with that database source and what we're doing with it. So it affects both health and safety files, how we're going to hand the information back to the client, but also how do we gather the current information available. And then when you go to the area teams and they don't have it, and we're approaching 2025, which is the HSE agreement date, I don't know how we escalate these sort of topics upwards and who's responsible for the holistic databases that we're sending the information to, please.
Okay, so first of all, the standard that I've been working on, the project I've been working on, doesn't cover the remit of, unfortunately, of who handles what, who's responsible for what when it gets handed over. It's literally, this is the way that HE will operate, and these are the templates to use. With regards to ADMM and any other format that they wish to have it in, it does change quite rapidly. I think I've brought these issues up not only at this meeting, but I've brought them up with Mark Byard as well, because as far as I'm concerned, it is unclear. You're right, Pav. Richard, I mean, I'm not asking you to dig me up and all it, but has there been any movement on clarification of any of that? Where we hand stuff over, who's managing it, who's responsible for it?
No, there hasn't, and I have asked Amy Williams for clarification on that. I think, is she going to join the call today, Doug?
She said she would join, I think, between 10 and 12. So hopefully,
maybe that's the question we can save for Amy.
Yeah. I think the ADMM work job, Pav. I think all the information about ADMM and who's responsible, who's taking stuff, where they archive it, how they manage it, how they pass it out. I think that's something that falls slightly outside of what I'm doing, and someone like Amy would give you a little bit more information on that.
That's brilliant. And the question to Richard is related to our SIP project of LTC and all of the other contracts, all of the contracts that are going through. You only achieve good health and safety if it's integrated into the contracts. So is there a team that's going to reflect EN 105 into the contract arrangements, both works information, site information, and asset information handover? If you don't put it into the contract, we're going to struggle. So who's looking after that, please?
My understanding is EN 128.
105.
105. I thought that 105 was being withdrawn.
It will be withdrawn when the new one is released. At the minute, as far as I know, I've seen contracts before, recent contracts, and they have reference to 105 in them. Not all of them, because that's another issue that we have. There's a little bit of inconsistency within contracts, but the contracts I have seen says that you will use 105 or a health and safety file template. Now, as I said, we're in a little grey area in a transition period at the minute, whereby we're waiting for this to be released in September. I cannot withdraw something without having a finalised, approved replacement for it.
Could I just add to that? We had invited Dave Townsend to comment on the 105 update. The latest feedback I had was that, as Ian has said, once the new CDM processes are released, EN 105 will be updated and withdrawn and subsumed into the DMRB, and he's actually asked for a number of names. I mean, this actually goes back about 8 to 9 months from PD Working Group to assist him in developing the update of 105. So I would assume from that 105, the replacement for 105, won't be available until early in sometime early next year, I would guess, based on the current timescales. But that's my understanding of the current situation from Dave as of last week. I think we've also got a question from Tim Bowes.
Yes, not so much a question, Doug, but just coming back on Tim's point, we've been following the newer format for health and safety file on A14, and that was following seeking authorization from Richard's level earlier on. So perhaps it would be useful if I could join that discussion outside this meeting, I was going to say.
Yeah.
Okay. Is that for Ian to set a quick call up?
Yeah. Because he's in charge of the A14.
Yep, that's great. Thank you. Is that okay, Ian? You can.
Yeah, fine.
Bring the availability.
Yeah, we'll tie up because I just need to know where we are with the file. Because I take it we've completed the file, or it's nearly complete.
It's in progress. Good way through, and I wouldn't say it's been without difficulties. So it would be useful to share knowledge and input to the conversation.
Right, no problem. Okay.
Great.
Yeah, our M6 is about 6 weeks away, so yeah.
Okay, I think we have a question from Paul Brown.
Yeah, just a request actually, because I'm starting work on SMA, and if we've got discussions going on about what the health and safety files need to look like and how we're interpreting the void by 105 existing or not existing, I wouldn't mind participating in those.
So let's just clarify. Let's just clarify. 105 is essentially the health and safety file. That's that's a template to say what we need as Highways England and where you're going to put it. 105 is an interim advice note, so it's always going to be temporary until something more certain and more permanent came along. Now 105 will be withdrawn and replaced pretty much by the work that Etty and Detone had, which included a lot of people on this call in being involved and writing that new template. That new template will take 105. Simple as that. Yeah. Now we've had a call outside of this about are those sections within that template still aligned with ADMM? And we've all worked out during that call that it's actually changed in the last 18 months 9 times from ADMM. So they change the sections on a regular basis. And like we said before, I think the only way we can do this is rather than chase our tails and just keep updating with ADMM whilst they understand what they want, is to let it settle, release it in September so we can use it. Yeah. And then from then on, we'll review it and try and align ourselves with ADMM as they change. In the meantime, before that's released, use Ian 105.
For M62 and A1M smart motorway projects, when they went to SCAR3, I prepared the health and safety files for SCAR3, and in there I put a right upfront statement saying this does not comply with EN 103 because EN 105 because EN 105 is out of date and not appropriate and not legal. And that went through quite happily, and I put it into the ADMM format. Because EN 105, I know what you're saying, it's an interim advice note, but it was written in 2008. The regulations have changed, changed for 5 years since that. So I think the use of EN 105 and just is, even though there isn't a replacement for it, it is wrong. So keeping something that's wrong because we haven't got anything better, I just don't buy that. I think it should be withdrawn completely and taken off the books, which is, I think, what David Townsend indicated this week.
David Townsend is trying to facilitate that at the moment. The process of removal of documents has become somewhat complicated. we are in a transition period of putting together an external facing web page where a lot of this information will be stored. Okay, so there is a project under the guise of Home Safe and Well. One of the problems is there's a lot of activity taking place, and Mr. Merry's put his hand up now as well to ask questions or provide answers.
I'm aiming to provide an answer, Paul. I'm just looking at the scheme or the alliance scope, and it doesn't mention EN 105 in any of it. And when it talks about scheme handover, EN 105 is not required in the contract for the alliance, so you can rest easy.
Yeah. Okay, Tom. Yeah, that's. I was planning on going down the route I've done with the Smart Motorway project so far.
Yeah, and that's fine.
If we've
That's
got contractors,
absolutely fine.
but Balfour are also on the alliance, and if they're reading EN 105 as still being relevant because there's a lack of clear guidance and it's still on the statute effectively, then it causes confusion. That was kind of where I was going.
Yeah, but as I say, in terms of the management of the alliance, EN 105 doesn't figure.
Great, thanks, Tom.
Okay, thank you, everybody. Is there any? Oh, Rob, do you want to just posted a message I noticed? Do you want to expand on that?
I think it's probably been covered, particularly by Ian, about what the current scene is. So, I mean, until 105 gets superseded, 105 is in circulation, and it does have it has a useful content as a starter for the sorts of things that might populate the handover information, I would say. And the health and safety file is a sort of report type slim document that almost forms an index to the handover information. GG 182 is useful for the structure of the personnel, and particularly on larger schemes, and even for smaller schemes, helps define the timescales and the sorts of processes involved. It's never an easy process. I think that's obvious by the conversation. But there are various things like a tracker. I think that one of the first things is a tracker for the handover information, which helps you establish the scale of the exercise involved, and then you can start to program it in. But I think one of the first things is someone actually looking after it specifically on big schemes, and a tracker for the documentation.
Well, thanks, Robert. Yeah, I mean, I think most bigger schemes have a handover manager, don't they? I suppose it's a little bit more complicated on smaller schemes where that post may be split. But yeah, and not just handover manager, but a handover team with the amount of data that needs to be handed over.
So I think for clarity, because we're getting bogged down in the weeds slightly, Doug. Tom Merry is Smart Motorways. SIP and LTC is Ian Scott. David Lum, who's on the call, is business partner for RIP North. Business partner for RIP South is Ian Lockwood. They're the people you need to go to getting this devil in the detail. Okay.
Okay. Thank you, Richard. Are there any further comments, or we'll move on to item 3 on the agenda? Okay, can take that as a no. So I'll try and share the screen. So hopefully that's come through. So if I could introduce Mark Bridges, who is representing Supply Chain Safety Leadership Group and the interface with the Health and Safety Hub. So over to you, Mark, if that's okay.
Yeah, that's fine. Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. So I've basically been asked to come and sort of give an update. So I believe Leslie Ward came and gave an update around the Supply Chain Safety Leadership Group and what they're doing. So I'm not going to sort of, reiterate much of that. If you want to go to the next slide, Doug. But I mean, just as a sort of refresher, the way it works and the sort of interface between the Supply Chain Safety Leadership Group and the Safety Hub is the Supply Chain Safety Leadership Group are obviously going to create and drive this strategic direction around some of the high risk areas, the fatal risk areas, and they're going to come up with and develop these common intent documents, which are effectively just a high level document around the must do's, the things that we as suppliers will all sign up to and agree to conform to. The role of the Safety Hub really is then to put, I suppose, the meat on the bones and start to develop guidance documentation and other toolkits really. It's not just about sort of churning out guidance, but obviously providing other bits as part of a toolkit. I suppose just to before I go on to that, it's probably important just to sort of make you aware of the status or the current or the imposed status of raising the bar going forward. So obviously previously, you know, that when the hub was first created, it was part of the managed motorway framework, and the documents that were created was then created with Highways England's badge on for, you know, Highways England, but created by the supply chain. I think going forward, Highways England very much want all of this documentation, whether it's common intent or raising the bar, to be industry owned, industry driven, and created and complied with. So as Richard sort of touched on, there are some changes going ahead at the moment. So a few years ago, Highways England created its own website, but it did have a few things left on .gov, including raising the bar. There is now, as part of Home Safe and Well action, to create a dedicated safety page within Highways England's web pages, which will obviously be a very, you know, high level corporate information. So there still will be a purpose and a role for the Highway Safety Hub website, but effectively everything that is currently on .gov will be either archived or taken away. And we've had a few discussions around the sort of role and where will raising the bar sit. Will that go to Highways England or not? And I think the general view is that it's not. You know, when as we go through this review process and create new raising the bars to align with the common intents, we will drop the Highways England badge off the raising the bar. It'll probably get a supply chain safety leadership group logo on them. And you know, they will be owned, and then the custodians of those documents will be the Highway Safety Hub. So they'll have a slightly different look and feel, but generally my message is, you know, the purpose is still the same. You know, they are there to provide the guidance and the sort of meat on the bones to how to, you know, for organisations to comply with the common intent. If you go to the next slide, please, Doug. And again, please. Don't know, there's some animation on it. So yeah, so that's what the new sort of raising the bars will look like. And then if you go again, you'll see the insides look very much like a common intent document. You know, that we want to make sure there is that clear connection between a common intent document and a raising the bar. There was actually some debate at the last supply chain safety leadership group whether we should drop the name raising the bar, you know, and have you know, an opportunity to really, you know, divorce ourselves from the past and sort of create something new. You know, if there ever was a time to rebrand and reinvigorate, would be now. I put that to the hub group last week, and I think quite a few were obviously quite passionate about keeping that legacy. But I think there was also a view that, you know, it was like when we changed from you know, Marathon to Snickers and so on, everyone still sort of refers to the old product because we still know what it is. So I think, you know, we want to still keep the raising the bar brand. Plus the other thing is we've not come up with a better name yet, so that's another reason why we've not changed it. But that's certainly going to be the look and feel. If you could go to the next slide, please, Doug. So the reason why I'm sort of here today and sort of giving you an update is, as you're probably aware, and hopefully Leslie went through this, the common intents and the raising the bars are very much going to be structured and formatted around, you know, the general principles of prevention of trying to eliminate the hazard at source first. And what we've sort of determined as being above the line, we're trying to focus very much on actions and guidance that sort of eliminates where we can. So that's ultimately, you know, our view is the best way to do that is the design phase. You know, so we really need the principal designers to sort of support us and help us developing the guidance and the tools that we need to going forward, because a lot of it will start at design phase. You know, I think that the hub's been quite blessed in a way that we've always had good sort of designer support, but I think what we do need to do going forward is really just ensure that we've got these strong or even stronger links now back to the principal designers group, and then we can make sure we're you know, we're linked in so we can get that support and really sort of, you know, embellish the elimination elements of the guidance. Next slide, please, Doug. And just for people's awareness, so like I said, the Highway Safety Hub will still continue. It will be the main repository for information to do with Principal Designers Working Group, the Highway Safety Hub group, and Supply Chain Safety Leadership Group. What we are creating are dedicated web pages for each of the sort of risk areas that are identified. So just as an example, this is a screenshot of the IPV and Incursions Working Group. They're all very, you know, laid out in a very similar way. You know, they'll start with a bit of an introduction. They'll talk about that. You know, they'll host the common intent document. Then any associated raising the bars will all be hosted on the Safety Hub website. And then the way the website's then split up is around that, you know, the headings around the principles of prevention. So there'll be documentation and links to information to support you in the elimination phase, then in the isolation phase, etc. And you know, this will only be as good as the contributions that we get. You know, we can't do this alone. So again, if anyone's got any suggestions or any documentation where we can sort of really bolster this, then we'd certainly welcome it, and we're happy to sort of host it on the Hub website. Yeah, next slide, please, Doug. So I thought I'd just give you a bit of an update on some of the task and finish groups that are occurring. So the utility avoidance group, so that was sort of headed up by Leslie. The Hub sort of lead there is Liz Brathwaite. And then what we've also done, I had a call with Doug and some of the sort of working group leads in the Principal Designers group a few weeks ago, and we actually recognised there was quite a bit of synergy between what is happening in the Principal Designers Working Group as well as the Hub. So we've sort of tried to map across some days. This might be quite a surprise to some people like Mark, etc. But the general view is that we're going to try and recognise points of contacts between the Hub group and the Principal Designers group, and sort of make sure that they're both sort of tapped in together. I know Liz is looking to set up a bit of a utility working group to sort of take this forward now and really start to understand stuff. So I'm sure Mark will be involved in that, or somebody delegated from Mark perhaps to do that. So so that's what we're trying to do now. So but as you can see with the IPV and Incursions one, you know, we don't currently have anybody connected. So if anybody's sat there and, you know, has got a bit of a passion for IPV or Incursions, you know, and wants to get involved, then, you know, we'd certainly welcome any you know, any volunteers really. But in terms of where we are with the task and finish group, so the common intent for utility avoidance is done. That's been agreed and that's been issued. That is actually on the Hub website. You know, please familiarise yourself with it. Obviously it's very high level, but obviously the next step now is to review Raising the Bar 9. I believe Liz shared it with this group to get some comments, because as I say, you know, we've sort of restructured Raising the Bar 9. We've reviewed it to a point where it's you know, a bit legible, but I think when we've looked at it, I think we could still do a bit better in the design phase and be a bit stronger if we can. So any comments anybody has would be greatly appreciated on that. As I say, obviously we're looking then to set up a utility working group to take that a bit further. In terms of the IPV and Incursions, again, the common intent has been agreed and approved. That is on the website. The associated Raising the Bar with that is Raising the Bar 27, which is Incursions. We feel at the moment that's quite fit for purpose. There will be a time where we will start to you know, update that and put it into the new format, but at the moment we're trying to concentrate on additional Raising the Bars to support this, because there isn't currently any Raising the Bars around IPVs. So we're starting to create that. It's a bit difficult at the moment because a lot of what the common intent is sort of suggesting is the use of you know, improved technology such as autonomous IPVs and you know, deployed IPV cushions, which the framework around the use of those is not quite there yet. So it's probably looking towards the end of the year before we get the Raising the Bars for that particular common intent there.
Can I just say on that, Mark? There's seems to be quite a problem in the Yorkshire northeast region at the moment. I know on one or two of the schemes up there we're having a bit of an issue with incursions. So yeah, it is a hot topic, and I know it's one of Highways England's key objectives, the reduction of incursions.
Absolutely, yeah. It's we should get too many, to be honest, way too many. We need to get smarter in the way we do that. Next slide, please, Do. So accident investigation and lost loads, both those common intents are drafted. They're currently out for consultation and review. If no one's seen them, I can pass them on to Doug. I'm not sure what the mechanism there would be, but again, what we need there. So we look at accident investigation. I've seen the proposed common intent. A lot of it is around sort of defining a common structure for investigation, a sort of method in terms of identifying root cause. But a key requirement of the common intent is something we did have in Raising the Bar 26, but I think if we're all honest about it, we've never really exercised it the best we can, and that's really to get designers involved in investigations to truly understand, could we have eliminated the hazard or the incident at source. So that's in draft at the moment. If anyone wants to have a copy, I'll share that. But yeah, the next bit then would be sort of defining how the mechanisms to facilitate that. So when it sort of references particular levels of training, we need to define that as part of the hub group. Lost loads. This is one that was due to be in the pipeline to be done later in the year, but to be honest, when we've sort of looked at this, there's already a lost loads working group that was originally set up by Richard Mason and Balfour Beatty in Smart Motorways. That's done a hell of a lot of good work there. Has got likes of West Midlands Police involved. So we've basically took the learning from them, plus some information from the plant community working group. I've also done some good work around offloading and unloading vehicles. So we basically took a lot of that information, and Chris English has basically helped Phil develop a common intent already for that. So again, that is out for information and review. But if anyone, we don't have a principal design lead there. My only comment with the lost loads one at the moment, and I know Andrew will talk about the whole life design. Quite rightly, the whole life design one, as part of the common intent, talks about this move to off-site manufacture, which I think is needed and required, and it's where the industry should be going. But obviously that will increase the number of vehicle movements and offloading next to live carriageways, whereas the lost loads one slightly contradicts that and sort of suggests as part of the design phase we should be minimising the number of traffic movements and the need to offload at the side of the carriageway. So I think there needs to be some interaction between both of those to make sure we're clear in what we mean, really.
I think as well that links with the eliminating risk group as well, which Toria will talk about later, and working area space, access, egress, etc. So there's another link there that we need to explore.
Yeah, no, definitely.
So,
that would help, to be fair, if we had more space. I mean, that would help if we had more space we could offload, and I think that's half the thing. It's planning these activities to make sure we're not offloading so close to live traffic. If I'd like to think if we are going down the route of off-site manufacture, then these deliveries will be planned to the point, and won't be that often. Probably won't be as often as we are now of bringing materials on site to construct something on site. But when they are the planned, and then we are creating the space. So it eliminates both incursions and prevents objects going into the live carriageway.
And that's sort of one of my recommendations, that at stage 0 we start, or the project starts considering that, Housing England start considering that, in terms of not fixing the red line boundary, looking at that as their working area. So that was one of the sort of one of our key recommendations. But as I say, Tori will cover that later. But I mean, yes, I mean, any documents, please share them, and I'll pass them out across the group.
Next slide, please. Not gone through yet.
Yeah, looks good.
Yep.
Safe use of plant.
Yeah, so originally this was termed plant person interface, but a group's been set up now. Again, you know, it'd be good if we had you know, a design representative on the group. That'd be fantastic. But the minute that there's a sort of group being set up, and it's looking, like I say, originally looked at plant person interface, but I think when you try and apply that to the principles of prevention, you know, and they start to define the scope of the group and the activity, I think there was a real focus that a lot of the time we, you know, we don't always select the right tool, right plant for the operation. We tend to go for equipment that's very versatile and, you know, in terms of the construction. But what we probably do is should be better at planning and designing activities to ensure that we can eliminate people wherever we can. You know, we can sort of move to more autonomous or robotic type equipment, and so the group sort of really changed its focus now from just being about plant person interface, although obviously that's the key risk associated with plant, but in general they term themselves safe use of plant, and it's really going to focus around the sort of 6 areas of design, planning, innovation, standardizing best practice and standardizing equipment. And then obviously things like supervision and human factors, because again, I think when they reviewed some of the incident, they felt that a lot of the incidents are caused by a degree of complacency. You see the complacency by individuals who perhaps don't or no longer fear the risk of being struck by an item of plant, or the supervisor failing to adequately control operations to ensure segregation is in place. So they're the areas that is still very much in development. They've, you know, the scoping out the thoughts and requirements within the common intent. Expected timeline around that is a common intent out for draft around about September. And very similarly in terms of the mental health one. And again, you know, we'd encourage some representation from principal designers again if anyone's interested. But this group is obviously looking at a lot of the industry-wide stuff, you know, that's been delivered by the likes of Safer Highways and Mates in Mind, etc. But then also looking at it from a perspective that I think the majority of the larger organisations that work directly for Highways England probably have you know, arrangements in place, but it's about understanding, you know, is that across the board? Can we sort of expand that to the tier 2s and 3s and some of the SMEs, etc. So I think all the there's good stuff out there. I think they're just trying to define how they can set a standard that everyone can meet, really. And the final slide, please, Doug. So obviously, the Highways England passport was brought into the Supply Chain Safety Leadership Group. They were the ones that undertook the review. So following the 2-year proof of concept, the scheme was extended by 6-7 months to allow for a review, to which the Supply Chain Safety Leadership Group sort of carried out that review. I think there was a combination of, I think they still felt, whilst it probably wasn't tested as well as it should have been, I think there was a general view by the group that there was still efficiencies to be had by introducing it. But I think obviously also by the fact that I think over 18,000 people had signed up across 500 organisations, I don't think they really felt they could bin it. So I think they put a recommendation to the Highways England Health and Safety Exec in January, and it was agreed that we would extend the scheme by 4 years. So we've started to put in a project implementation plan, which includes an upgrade to the system to the latest version in August, and also a change to the Highways Common Induction, because I think they felt that was the I suppose the biggest Achilles heel and the thing that put a lot of people off was having to send somebody for a full day's training when the training wasn't. A lot of it was padded out to make it a full day, and then obviously the costs associated with that. So we've sort of looked at the Network Rail example, and we sort of started to develop an online version now, which is currently running at about an hour and a half, and we still feel that's a bit too long. So we're trying to cut that down to about 40 minutes. But obviously doing it online, you know, your costs are significantly reduced, and obviously the time to travel to do it is not impacted. So, and then I won't touch on the last one. I mean, that's the last thing for me. I'll let Andrew talk about the work he's doing around safety by design.
Okay, so yeah, thank you for that, Mark. I just think that Mark's really set the context really well there, actually. So the Safe by Design one of the Common Intent series is the one that most relates to this group. Where it's at the moment, it's just getting its final review and sign off by the main SCSLG chairing group. Final comments are due by the end of this week, and then Phil Clifton from Balfour's, who's the SCSLG chair, will sign that officially to say it can be launched. I'm due to write a comms piece to get it out to the supply chain. The vehicle for that, the principal vehicle actually they were choosing for comms, is actually Safer Highways. So I don't know how many people are familiar with the Safer Highways site. I have to say I wasn't particularly, and that was remiss of me, and many of you may well be. But that's the chosen vehicle for getting it out. But we will also be putting it out through the hub site and Mark's SCSLG pages there. So that will be with you all very shortly. So I didn't really want to put it up on the slide today, only because it's not actually about final ratification, but there's the content of it. There's absolutely no issue with sort of talking through that. So most of these common intents, the couple that are out there already, if you've already seen them, you'll know they're really based around some core principles that we as a supply chain all feel we should embrace, and we want to see setting the tone of everything that we do. So they're very much down sort of we will, we shall sort of messaging to really drive these into everything we do. So the key principles for the Safety by Design common intent, the first one really is around just setting the correct tone. In other words, that we would expect design teams to actually live and breathe the Safety by Design thinking ethos, that it would always be at the forefront of the mind in the design process, and that's a cultural thing. And many of us in organisations embrace all that, but we have to remember this is through the whole supply chain, and maybe smaller design consultancies and supply chain contractor partners may not actually have the exposure to the things that we see routinely and just assume everybody knows and embraces. So this is a message to get perhaps out to a broader field. Now, the second thing is really talking about the whole digital, embracing digital as the way we're going. So, for example, using the Highways Safety Hub site for getting information out, for sharing best practice. We're really keen to get further engagement from the O&M supply chain, and also more from contractors in terms of stuff that can feed back to us, to designers, to think about in the design process. It's difficult for us to reflect in our designs things that we don't know exist. So best practice from contractors that really could be just slightly modifying our designs that we may not even know about. So it's much more about getting that flow of information coming back into design. I know we've had goes at it in various ways, including the whole life design task group that we had through PDWG, but there's a lot more to be done there, and a lot more sharing of sort of video rehearsals and so on, which are used routinely now by the contractor side of our business.
the common data environment in that as well. So the PAS 1192.6 principle that we'll have a constant stream of data through the whole life of a project. So as designers, we set the tone for that. We set the recognition of the attributes in PAS 1192 Part 6, which will go on down through the process to subsequent design stages, and then eventually to the contractor and on to O&M, and ultimately would still be there if necessary for dismantling, etc. So really embracing the 1192.6 as the common data environment that we will live by now, and that it's going to be, as I say, very much whole life. So the live model would always be there as a live single point of reference. So probably we would start out now, as we often do anyway, 3D modeling, but also putting some 4D program type modeling into that as well, and GIS based, for example, for tagging information. All these are things that we're all evolving anyway at a higher level amongst the higher tier design chain. But again, we need to make sure that we bring the whole supply chain design community along with that, so that they're engaged in it. Mark mentioned about off-site manufacturing assembly or design for manufacturing assembly. We stopped short of saying that will absolutely be the default, because actually there are situations, and Mark alluded to them there, where, for example, that you're bringing loads to site. Actually, there are other knock-on effects of some of the solutions we might come forward with. So we have to also understand the impacts of what we think is a really good mitigation or elimination strategy is actually then generating another hazard issue as a result of that. So it's thinking beyond our immediate solution to the impacts of that solution. But the principle of design for manufacturing assembly is getting more and more embraced by the industry. Highways England are certainly pushing to do much more of that, standardized products, etc. Partly for the health and safety benefits of doing more off-site, but also more certainty of program delivery when you are on site, and hence less customer impact by overruns of traffic management, etc., and delays. The less we're on the network, the less potential for RTAs, etc., as a result of being there and having queuing traffic or whatever. So there is an overall push towards standardization and off-site manufacture as one of the core principles. And finally, and I've already mentioned it actually earlier a little bit, is about using virtual rehearsal. So trying to visualize what this construction sequence will be, how the elements will plug together, and there's some really good stuff out there. We had a nice mix in the working group. Have a nice mix in the working group for Safety by Design, which includes Terry Meadows from Kier and Ben Wade from Costain, Mike Fowler from Balfours, as well as Tim Bowes, who's on today from Atkins, and Ian Patey from WSP, and HE represented by Tom Merry. And it really was a collaborative venture in pulling all that together. And what the likes of Mike Fowler brought was some really good visual rehearsal material. We happen to be working on the M4 SMP at the moment, and they're doing a bridge there over the Thames at Bray, and there was a whole video rehearsal of that prior to the actual works on site, because they had a full closure of the M4. I have done for 1 or 2 weekends now, and clearly you don't want overruns, so they could map out the sequence, and they had hold points established so that if the program wasn't being met during the weekend closure, they could pause it at that point and come back. But because it was so well planned, even including, in fact, 2-meter distancing was modelled in for some of these works. It all went to plan, and subsequent to that, actually Mike shared video of the actual overnight works, etc. So it's a really great learning tool, but also it helps us as designers begin to think far more about what a contractor has to contend with. So the virtual rehearsals and video rehearsals certainly something that we're hoping to promote. So that's the core elements. I realise it's difficult without seeing a slide with all this listed on it, but the common intent document, as I say, should be out with us all within a fortnight. I would suggest, if it gets the sign-off that we're expecting, we've not had any notable feedback from the main SCSLG group to modify the common intent that's there drafted now. So as I say, I'll be putting a comms piece out for it, and then it'll be launched. And then I just wanted to touch on the fact that Mark mentioned there about connecting into safe use of plant, or People Plant Interface Group, as it was known, which is chaired by Richard Stewart of Costain. I was asked to attend their last meeting, and one of their first, in fact, I think it's the first point of principle on their document will actually be around design, and particularly about eliminating the need for site works and simplifying any necessary on-site activities. So they're very much bought into, as a starting point, the design community, thinking really heavily about what's involved in needing plant on site. And again, what I've said to them is, it would really help us as a design community to know what plant's available there. Now, it's really easy to get out of touch these days with what's going on, because progress and evolution is happening at such a pace now. There's a lot to do. In fact, HE have a space now, I think, connected and autonomous plant, and the move towards using remotely operated plant. There's something at the moment about rather than standing there alongside a piece of plant to see it's done 40 passes over some material to get it compacted, that there'll now be density metering, remote density monitoring, so that you can know when it's achieved the required density, etc. So there's so much stuff going on, but we as a design community perhaps don't know that those things are available, and how we should be doing our designs to accommodate them. So I think that's probably a summary around where we are with the safety by design aspect of this. I don't know if there's anything, Mark, just to go back to you to say, do you think I've captured there the hub sort of perspective on it as well? Yeah, no, you have. Yeah, thanks for Andrew. Yeah. And I think we're roughly to time still, aren't we, Doug?
We're doing very well, actually. Thank you. Yes.
Yeah.
There is a question from Pav. Would you like to come in, Pav?
Could I just ask, have we looked at, so the bit that I found very interesting is when you were talking about structuring PAS 126 part, the modelling part, and how have we spoken to the client side, i.e. the operations directorate, of how they're going to absorb the models? Because the bit that I'm worried about is I've got large projects myself where we're going to do all of this work, and I've had discussions about this with Doug before, that we do a lot of this design work, do all the visualization, GIS and everything else, and the actual information being, one, kept up to date is difficult because there's not time allocated for it by Highways England, and two, when you actually get to a health and safety file or a handover position, how do you hand the models over to the next stage if they're then not going to be kept up to date? Because that triggers an element of risk that if the information is not up to date or kept up to date, the workers can be put at risk.
Yeah, no, very valid points, Pav, and the handshake thing in particular, it becomes a really crucial issue now. I mean, traditionally, it's always been an issue with hard copy data, hasn't it? I mean, Paul Brown's on this call, and Paul's thumped me over the head many times about M1 Junction 19 and the fact they've got a lovely bookcase weighing down a side cabin somewhere in remotest Northamptonshire with stuff that they never go and look at because the health and safety file is so massive, or even the disk is so big. He can hardly carry it around in a briefcase. We need to, the point about 1192.6 is to try and get some consistency to this, isn't it? The whole point about the common data environment, what that term means is we all recognise the format of the data that's coming to us from the previous partner in the chain. So it's still early days. I think we as the design community, because we're working much more in a BIM world and a 3D world now, there hasn't been, well, very rare examples, I imagine, of 1192.6 having been effected through the whole life of any project yet. because we're actually setting the tone. But what we need to be doing, and it's working quite well, for example, with delivery partnership schemes now, where I know we're working with Costain very actively in transferring our hazard model over to the site, and the site inheriting that and then taking the information that's there with those hazards where we've not been able to eliminate them, to take the mitigation measures and then keep that model up to date, so it is always a live model. But I think it's certainly nowhere near custom and practice yet, Pav, and understanding the handshake and the supply chain being totally bought into being collaborative on this, so that it does work, because it does ultimately benefit everybody. What's the point of us generating loads of stuff as designers that the contractor then goes and puts away in some dusty corner, and then they start off with the whole thing again? That's just not the intent of this. And the whole point is that we live and breathe contemporary health and safety information that's kept up to date. Stuff's archived as soon as it's dealt with, but the other stuff is still there live and for everybody to see. And I think we're moving in the right way. And I say I'm really impressed with the way, sort of on various jobs, that Costain are taking this on across the country, and each region does things slightly differently as well. So what we want to do is try and get an industry that does things one way. So you move between a job, whether it's in the southwest or Scotland or Wales or wherever it is, you recognise the format of the data, because it's just becoming a universal platform. So we've got a long way to go, but the framework is there for us to operate within.
Thank you, Andrew. Yeah, I agree with lots of your comments there. We've got a couple of questions, firstly from Richard and then Nicola.
Yes, Amy's now on the call. Amy Williams from SES, and maybe she can comment on what's happening with the future management of health and safety files for our new assets. Sorry, Amy. She's on mute. Maybe she's left her computer and gone to make a cup of tea. Not to worry. We can come back to Amy maybe. Sorry,
okay, Nicola.
Yeah, hi everybody. I was just going to add to Pav's question about that, and it's great that we might have whole of life models, but one thing that sort of concerns me, until everybody is using them the way that they should, that even if we receive a model for health and safety file at the start of a new project as PCI, that because it's in a model, we might be fooled into a false sense of accuracy, because it's almost like we're being given something to 3 decimal places, but actually, the quality of the information in there might not be as we would wish. And I think, like Andrew said, we all need to work collaboratively whole of life, and there needs to be take up at every stage to input into the model. But I do worry that if we get lucky and we get PCI and we receive a model back at some time in the future, that there still needs to be a validation of that information, that we don't assume that is complete or whole. Just a flag really that there's still going to be gaps, for a long time. I think we're a long time away from receiving, almost perfect models as PCI for future projects.
No, it's a really good point, actually, Nicola, particularly around the validation thing. And there's a liability issue anyway, isn't there? Of course, we've always had that as designers, where you're inheriting something from a previous stage from another designer, about how robust is that information, and different businesses take a different approach as well. So, I might flag up a hazard which, you don't think is relevant, and vice versa. I've missed something that you would routinely have put in because of some experience you've got. So there's always that aspect to it. And yes, we've not really driven this long enough and hard enough to fully get the benefits out of it, but we are making a start. I mean, I think Tori is on the call. We've just inherited the information from Arups for A30 Chiverton to Carling Cross, and it was in a spreadsheet format in recognisable fields, compliant with 1192.6, and we've been able to pull that into our system and go back, and we are doing a validation process on it. But it's instantly understandable to us, and we can display it in our safety, well, the one I've demonstrated previously at PDWG. Our GIS-based system, and there it is, and Costain are looking at it and saying, yeah, we can work with that. So it's evolving a little bit. You're absolutely right. There's always going to be, isn't there, that validation aspect and a review of data needed at handshake.
That's it, and I think that's what we do now, and the models will certainly make that validation process easier because it'll be visible what's there and what isn't. And I think at the handover points, you know, from client into, you know, PCI for future project, or handover of health and safety file to client, if there are any gaps, they're going to be much more visible and at the forefront of the at the meeting, rather than, you know, buried in paperwork that you perhaps only find out, you know, weeks into the project or months into the project maybe. So it's definitely an improvement, but I just wanted to flag that perhaps, you know, we sometimes get fooled with models thinking that they're more accurate than they are, and because do you know what I mean?
Absolutely, and we're never going to change that rubbish in, rubbish out stuff.
Yeah,
it's always going to be there. So it always needs to be, you know, you need to take a professional approach to it when it comes to you.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But a very valid point.
Okay, thank you. We've got a question from Nick, and then Abby.
My comment which I put in the chat was that we've got the Smart Motorways Alliance currently mobilising. And one of the issues we have on the smart motorway schemes is that we touch some assets, and then other assets we don't touch at all. And the asset records, obviously the bits in between, aren't there. So we end up creating lots of good information, top quality information. But then because we don't fill the gaps in, we end up with something that probably can't be used.
Yeah, and this is a really important point, Nick, because it's always been the thing about network information, hasn't it? And what we do know and what we don't know, and redundant services as well, and old comms equipment. It's a bit like satellites in space. We're littering the network with more and more stuff, and we don't know a lot of legacy material in terms of assets in the areas we're going into actively anyway. But you're right, there's going to be these sort of prehistoric zones in between where we've done recent works where we still don't understand.
But we have the opportunity, that was the point.
Yeah.
But the problem is nobody has the budget. Yeah.
No.
And you think about it, when you're doing an SMA scheme, or any smart motorway scheme, really, or an RDP type scheme, you should actually, the argument is, should Highways England take a bigger view and say we actually need to complete the assets for the whole of that area, whether you touch it or not, because this is a fantastic opportunity to get that area squared.
Absolutely, and as you know, well from HE themselves as a key client, but the drive now about service strikes and utility information and all that stuff, which we get some basic information, but we never get it to the extent you'd really like to have it. That money spent early can save you massive issues, as you know, obviously downstream on site with delays, etc. When you encounter something which you could have known about if only a little bit more detailed investigation had been carried out in the design stage. So it feeds back into the utility strike piece as well, in my mind, that the more information we have, the safer we make the whole process, as well as making it program efficient in terms of delivery.
And the follow on from that, because a number of the schemes I'm dealing with, there is, you know, this sort of 5-year maintenance free. That's a bit hit and miss. So there's assets in there that need maintenance work that's not being picked up by RDP schemes. You know, I've raised it on a number of the schemes in the Yorkshire North East region, and okay, that's all budget related, and obviously there isn't a bottomless pit. But as Nick says, you know, there's assets out there that we're not capturing, and there's assets out there that need remediation, which is not been undertaken. So it's a double-edged sword, isn't it? Abby, is that?
Yeah, sorry, because I'm on the N25, I suppose we've got a different perspective. I can see it from both sides because we do interface a lot with the major projects. And I think someone was asking on the chat about handover of information. Some of the things that Nick was saying around there being assets that are not updated. And the big challenge we have is interfacing the information that's provided into our systems. We have assets on the network that are 30 years old or older in some cases. So the original information for those is not in the current formats. And it's a big task to update an entire network. When we do schemes and major projects, it's a good opportunity to be able to update that information. But we don't currently have that. And it's the digital supply of information is, well, I suppose it's constantly changing. We're 10 years into our contract and there are different versions of standards of how information is provided to us over the years. So it is a constant challenge to keep that updated and an interface into our asset management systems, because it should be a seamless approach through designing a large scheme that fits onto a section of the road that then has to be maintained after that. So there's a lot of opportunities there to improve that.
And Doug, it's Richard. I see that Amy's got her hand up.
Yes.
Yes. Richard, I couldn't hear your question properly. I was breaking up, but I've left the meeting and rejoined now, but I didn't know if you could see that in the chat. Do you want to re-ask me the question, because I can hear now?
Okay, we were talking about the management of health and safety files and information relating to the older assets and how we can share that information as sort of pre-construction information with designers.
Yeah, okay. So as part of the work we're doing in SCS at the moment, we have a fit for the future element of it, of what things do we need to look at and can do. We can certainly look at that as part of that. We haven't done so far, Richard. It's something we could consider. It hasn't been raised to date.
Okay, well, I think it's a big area, especially affecting
It is a big area.
this community as well. And whilst you're still got connection, maybe you could share with us what's happening regarding the sort of asset management, because there are numerous sort of systems we feed into as designers, and we don't always know what's happening with that information and how well it's being maintained.
So it's not something I have a huge involvement with, Richard, but the asset management, there's an asset management transformation program that Leela Taxi's heading up, that's working through and looking at asset management in its totality across all of our assets. I can certainly get feedback from that and understand from her, but it's not something I could answer directly.
Okay, I think maybe. Sorry.
It's probably a conversation that you, me, and Leela need to have.
Yeah.
And to understand, I can certainly put that in. I thought that's what I was hearing as the question. Yeah, I can certainly put that in.
Okay, and maybe Doug, for our future meetings, we can invite Leela to come to attend to share what's happening.
I'm sure she'd be really, really willing to do that.
Thank you, Amy, and thank you for joining the meeting as well.
Yeah, no, it's fine. I'll message Leela about it.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, everybody. We're approaching 11, so we had a little break penciled in. Paul's just snuck in with another question. Paul? You're on mute, Paul.
Sorry. Mark, a bit about the passport. Just from a designer's perspective, could you just outline what the expectations are that are coming out of the passport common intent and requirements in relation to designers?
I know why you're asking me this, so I don't know whether to defer it to Richard. So
you might as well defer it to me.
Yeah, go on.
Theoretically, there are exemptions. I say theoretically because in major projects, Mr. Munford and the program lead feel the exemptions. Why do we need exemptions? And we have agreed within MP that designers visiting site more than once a year need to participate in the passport and undertake the common induction test. Why? Because it shows leadership, it shows engagement, and it's the only way we're going to change the culture and behaviour of the industry.
Okay, just does that mean there will be this challenge comes from my health and safety business partner, who is leading on passport, has basically asked the question: is that going to be a mandatory instruction issued for major projects?
That's something that Mr. Merry and I have been talking about, and we need to go back to Mr. Munford, and I have a call with Mr. Munford on Monday.
Because we've got members of staff who cover major projects and ops and safety, operational side, OD works. No, if an OD, they don't need a passport, but in major projects, they do need a passport.
Yeah, but don't you think it's, you know, it demonstrates commitment?
I'm not against it, Richard. I'm absolutely not against it. The query is the confusion that potentially and the uncertainty.
I know, and I've been told off by the lady who's looking after it as well. So I get into trouble on all sides of the fence.
I'm just looking to try and make sure we get clarity, so we know exactly where we stand on this and whether it's mandatory and or not, and etc. That's all.
Okay, because I'm sure other consultants will also ask similar questions.
Okay, thank you, everybody. Thank you to Mark and Andrew. Yeah, obviously raised quite a number of questions there, and there's quite a lot of in the chat, which we'll catch up later and get responses if they require. I will send out information as it comes through from Mark and Andrew. And obviously, if there's any volunteers for the vacant PD working group link up roles, that would be much appreciated if you can send any feedback through. Suggest if we have a quick 10-minute break, and if we reconvene at 10 past, if that's okay, 10 past 11.
Yep.
Okay, thank you, everybody, and I'll see you in 10 minutes.
Thanks, Doug.
Okay, hi everybody. Trust you can hear me and you can see the next presentation. But you could confirm.
Yes, all clear, Doug.
Okay, great. Thank you very
Thanks,
much.
Doug.
Okay, if I could introduce Toria, who's our chair of the Eliminating Risk from the Outset Task and Finish group. So piece of work we've put together, and Toria will introduce the team as part of the presentation. So if I could hand over to Toria. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Doug. Good morning. I'm Toria Thomas. I've been chairing the Eliminating Risk from the Outset task group. So we started back in February with those 5 words, and our task was to go away, understand what those meant, and come up with some recommendations. And we've had an interim presentation in our last working group, and today we've got our recommendations to go through as a summary with you, and our final report I think was copied in the meeting invitation, so you can see all the more detail behind that as well. So sorry, could the next slide please. So just as a quick summary, eliminating risk from the outset is one of the strategies in the Home Safe and Well plan with Highways England. It's defined to implement new and innovative methods of road design and construction that eliminates risk to those constructing them, maintaining them, or driving on them. So we understand eliminating risk, but the outset we've defined as far back as you can get in the decision-making process. So we've used our principal designer team with our expertise and skills in this to try and support Highways England with their defining recommendations. The next slide, please, Doug. The aim being to prevent any identifiable risks at the beginning, going through all the different design processes into maintenance and operation, and those risks have either not being identified or not being mitigated. So using that Swiss cheese model, making sure none of those holes line up all the way through, so you don't end up with a risk at the end, which could cause incident or injury. So if we have the next slide, please, thanks. We looked at a number of different areas. We had a real broad start, trying to think of all the different things we could look at in this area. And these were the number we came up to with a bit more detail, and then the ones in orange are the ones we've taken forward. So we did this assessment to look at how easy it would be to implement some of these recommendations and what the impact of implementing them would be. And we're obviously focusing on that corner where they're easier to implement while having the biggest impact. So I'm going to quickly go through the summaries of the ones in orange, and if anyone wants to, from our team, would like to join in when they get to their page, just stick your hand up and I can pull you in. But I've just literally taken the summaries off each of our recommendations. So first of all, if we look at standards on the next slide, please. So we identified that standards and specifications are one of the earliest ways that risk can be looked at and start to be eliminated or mitigated. And the recognition that standards and specifications, although generic, are a design that have health and safety considerations, and these need to be applied when writing the specs. And then there's that next step where different specifications or standards interface with each other, and actually the standalone risks attached to them may not be the same as when you combine them. And then the next step being obviously when you are putting them in your specific project location with different, you've got those standard risks to look at to help consider how you implement those in design. So there's an area of work around standards. The next one's around affected road workers, that's it. So we did some work looking at the maintenance side, people working on the road either in construction or in maintenance phases, and that recognition that we could look at this a lot earlier on in the project structure, perhaps bringing the MRSS into stage 0 to look at how road worker safety would be influenced by what the need of this project is. Bringing that forward into stage 1 at option selection and looking at safety as part of stage 1. This came up regularly. Looking at stage 0 and stage 1 came up in a number of different recommendations. But in this instance, looking at what will the maintenance requirements be. Looking at lessons learned, again, it links up with some of the other working groups, but again, a very important way of understanding what's gone wrong to try and mitigate it for the future. Looking at how we're going to design and how that design will need to be maintained, actually having that as a mindset. Looking at the health of road workers as well as safety. Often that can be sort of thought about secondly, make sure it comes up to be equal. And then understanding why this activity would be needed as part of our the design. And by the time you get into stage 6 of maintenance, that's the opportunity then to provide feedback to projects that are currently in early stages. So that cycle continues. Next area we looked at was working space. And again, you'll see a lot of interlinking going on with these different recommendations from different topics. Again, looking very early on about what will be required, what sort of construction will it be, what sort of working space do we need. We touched on in our meeting earlier about lost loads and incursions. Have we got the space to have the traffic management, to have the working area compounds, the turning circles, separating people from vehicles, and bringing that in earlier. Having a preliminary whole life health and safety assessment that starts from the very beginning, where we where the whole life is looked at from the start of a project, looking through design, construction, operation, maintenance, and then reviewed and updated as the projects go on. Doug, do you want to jump in at this point?
Well, yeah, just really to say that obviously there's a lot of crossover, as we've already mentioned, between the work that supply chain are doing and their various task and finish groups and this particular area, particularly when you're linking with Andrew around off-site construction, access, etc. So there's a huge area of overlap there, I think, and it will be good to, as those initiatives develop, to sort of link across. So that was it, really.
No, thank you. No, definitely. We were looking at, again, picking up lessons learned. We've already talked today about the digital construction rehearsals. So you can find out early on what that working space is going to need. That can go into your red line boundary plans, which goes into DCO planning. So you're thinking about this right from the very beginning. And then looking at the residual risk database of the existing network and how that inputs into the pre-construction information. So this information is available from the beginning. Design phase plan was our next area. We were working in parallel with the work Ian's been doing, and I understand a lot of this overlaps, but we wanted to just complete the work we were doing so that there would be a template for this. It would be part of the PCF product suite. So it's considered a document that needs review and consultees. That it would be initially part of a client brief for stage 0. So right from the very beginning, you're looking at how you manage health and safety, and then regularly reviewed through the project with the aims of the client's understanding the issues through design and into construction and maintenance. You're identifying these early. You're looking at how the principal designer role becomes involved earlier on, and the duty holders are defined from the very beginning of a project. And then the final set was buildability. And again, this came up a number of times. And to summarise some of our recommendations here, we would be looking at CDM duty holders being appointed and defined from the outset. So these could be within Highways England, they could be within the suppliers. And then high-level pre-construction information would be available from the asset management database. Looking at with the early appraisal sifting tool to include buildability along with the strategic, economic, financial assessments that go on, that buildability is part of that. Looking at holding design workshops much earlier on with operations and maintenance being part of that. So bringing in the people from the ground, the expertise. Having the safety control review group sessions earlier on in the project so that it directs the project from a much earlier stage. Looking again at the client brief, how we're going to manage health and safety, and then bringing the health and safety documents from the PCF product system. They start at stage 2 currently. Let's bring those forward, stage 1, stage 0, so that it's thought of alongside the economics and the environment considerations right from the beginning of the project. Amy, did you want to join in there? Your hand up.
Sorry, I couldn't get my mute off quick enough there. I think all I was going to say was when you said about the PCF products will have consultees and things, how broad were those consultees going to be? Which type of people? Kind of health and safety people? You know,
I saw those being the operations directorate.
Okay.
Manage and operate the road.
Okay. All right.
And an example is the A417 project I'm working on has a DBFO operator. Ideal opportunity to actually get some on the ground information from the DBFO as to how they actually manage the current road.
Okay, because we're looking at the moment at a couple of sign-offs and who it should be, and for a few things around that. Okay, that's useful. Thank you for that.
Yeah, and obviously getting the health and safety regional managers involved is very useful as well.
Yeah.
We've got a few hands up, Doug. I think. Go next.
Yes, yeah, just to follow up on that, I think we started developing what we called an O&M layer within GIS so that we could locate particular issues on the existing network that were being flagged up by the operations team, the local area maintenance team, well, I suppose one to identify if there were any related hazards, two to make sure that hopefully the project addressed those issues, but to transfer that information across from design teams, etc. So, I understand that there's an exercise looking at risk, sort of residual risk on the network. I don't know how far that's gone. I know we've talked about that at previous group meetings and with Ian, etc. That there was a piece that was looking at trying to capture residual risk, so that when you handed that section over as part of a scheme, that information could be transferred across to the design team to understand where those residual risks were. So I think that's a work in progress. I'm not sure how far that's got, but certainly if that continues to develop, that would be fantastic for us as principal designers to understand where those residual risks are, and not have to plow through lots of data and so it would become a fundamental part of the pre-construction information handover.
Good, thank you. Mark, you've got your hand up.
Yes, I wanted to just pick up on a couple of points, Victoria. Your design phase plan, I think it's really important that includes a stats management plan, and I'm sure under the section in sections agenda item 6, when Chris does his contribution, say much more about stats and stats management, but I think that's really important, and that also impacts on the red line boundary. At an early stage, you often don't know where the stats are going to be diverted because you haven't actually identified where the clashes are, and particularly where the real clashes are rather than the might be clashes. So that presents a real challenge at that early stage of the project in terms of defining where the red line boundary should actually be. So I think the stats management is a really important part of this piece that you're doing on eliminating risk from the outset. But yes, thanks very much.
Pav, I think you've got a question or a comment?
My general point is about looking at the network as a holistic area and looking at temporary design as well, things like diversion routes, things that are not normally considered. So what happens is they exclude the temporary diversion routes, how we're going to work with the outlined network in order to build our project. So the risk that we've got here, similar to the M3 smart motorways, is we might be transferring risk out if we don't manage the temporary condition of building it as well.
That's a good point. Yeah, no, there's a lot of work to be done around each of these recommendations to define them all. So this was really just setting the scene, which was part of our task. And this was our team. So just to introduce to everyone who was there, I know a lot of you on the call today. Mark Boyland was our SES link to Highways England. Can't be on the call today, but was very involved with us putting this project together. And I just want to thank you all, because it was one of those tasks we took on where we didn't quite know where it was going to go and what we were going to end up recommending. So it's been quite a process that's involved all of us pulling in our skills and expertise. So it's been a really good one to do, and great to have got our recommendations out to Highways England. So these were issued at the beginning of June. Richard and Ian, they both went to you as well, but we've still not had feedback through Mike Wilson or his team. We were hoping to get some feedback at some point. Don't know whether you have any updates on that. Richard, we'll jump in.
I chased Mike Boyland before he went on holiday, and he's been talking with Mike Wilson, but hasn't come back to confirm anything yet. I apologise.
No, that's okay. No, I spoke with Mike as well. So I know there was a meeting yesterday. So with any luck, it would be nice to get some feedback on this.
Yeah.
Just, to see whether we're aligned with what you were all been thinking.
No, but it's a very good piece of work. It's a very good piece of work. Thank you.
No, and thank you to the whole team who've worked on that as well. Mark, I think, have you your hand up still? A new hand?
Sorry, Toria, I forgot to put my hand down again.
No, that's fine. That's absolutely fine.
Must do better. Okay.
Slap wrist.
I'm just having don't worry, I'm just having a quick look at the chats there, but I think we've probably covered those. But if you've got any questions and want to post them in the chat, certainly have a look at them. Or if you want to jump in now, happy to take any questions on this.
It's a shame Paul Body didn't get a picture on his square.
I know we've had a little bit of trouble with getting through to Paul recently because Interserve systems all went down.
Oh.
So he didn't send a photo right at the beginning, so we've not managed to get one, unfortunately. But
turned into a
blue leave
square.
Him off,
Could I? I've got a little bit of a wish list, which is to link the work to road safety engineering and road safety audit, and also to our SCRG, NSCRG. That I've been asking a number of times. Can we get the history of standard failures to actually get some modular design and modular risk, that we're finding the same problems are happening in multiple areas, and for that to get fed back to yourself? So it's really an action. Would you mind getting in with SCS to see, can we get that? Where are the consistent problems with departures, or where are the consistency in road safety audit failures? How can we use your work to improve design continuously?
Yeah, I'll definitely push that back to Mike when he's returned from leave and see what's happening there. Paul?
Yeah, Ref Pav's point, that just feels like it's taking the work that we've done in a completely different direction and pulling at a bit of string, which is going to unravel a huge load of issues. And I'd suggest if we want to go and start looking at road safety issues within our designs and consistency, that's a whole new task group with a different remit, Pav. I think it just I know where you're going. If we're consistently designing things which the road safety auditors are picking up and then need departures or need redesign, then let's get a working group to look at that stuff, but let's take it from ground zero on those issues rather than partway through, which is what this group already is.
That's no problem. It's just an idea, and it's just that we've got very simple issues, things like how does the disabled person get to the emergency telephone? So it's issues like that then have a people risk issue, that if you really want to eliminate them at source, we've got to get some feedback to you to say these are the issues.
Yeah, I'm with you entirely, Pav. There's a lot of that stuff which, because it comes up late in the day, gets I'm not going to say ignored, but put under the too difficult at this stage. Had we thought about it earlier, we might have done something type category. Yeah, putting phones right on the top of embankments and stuff. Well, yeah, had we thought about it earlier, we might have got ourselves more space so we could have designed it properly, but we didn't. So too late to do anything now. So yeah, I think you're right, Pav. It's definitely a follow-up piece of work somewhere that needs to be done.
Yeah, I think that setting out these recommendations, that was the finish of our task finish group, to try and understand that from the beginning. So we had that first, that sort of brief, and there's a huge amount that could come out of this, I agree. And it could be in many different ways, and linking up with many of the different working groups and task groups that are going on. Robert?
I just, hi, Tori, and that's very interesting. I'm just thinking on what Pav said, because he always sort of triggers an interesting thought process. And I think it's probably talking more about sort of a comprehensive approach to design so that nobody's left out. But I particularly like the idea about a design phase plan of some kind. And this is talking about ourselves in Jacobs. We have a design input statement process. What we've done in the CDM fraternity or community is sorry, not fraternity, community. We've included ourselves in that, so we feel more embedded in the design team in the project, and the impact of that is just alluding to what Pav said about continuous approach. It builds the structure of the PD and the CDM process integrated within the design team rather than this sort of external bolt-on. So I think that's one aspect in answer to Pav's approach, is that the architecture of the project team needs to also be built around this thought about safety and design, and part of that is embracing the all the admin processes that the rest of the team are carrying out as well. You know, so you feel part of the process. There's just that point about the design phase plan that I thought was quite. It has other uses besides stating what we're going to carry out. You know. Thank you.
I agree. Thank you, Rob. That's useful. Doug, come back in.
Yeah. I think just building on Rob's comment there, we've developed a CDM document flowchart, which, you know, has CDM sat at the heart of design processes, and I think helps as a good tool to explain to the designers how we sit within the process and how all the documents add to the CDM and the health and safety process and procedures. And I think very similar to what Rob's saying there, really, to make sure that we're not a bolt-on, that we are actually, you know, at the heart of the design delivery process. And I think that you know, having that flow chart has helped quite a lot on certainly over the last couple of years and recent, you know, on the projects we deliver.
That sounds really useful. That's a good one. Yeah, there's all lots of different ways of doing it, isn't it? So I think part of this is trying to get some consistency for the high-risk income client teams, that they're knowing what to expect and how they get involved as well. So is there another hand up there? It went up and went down again. So if there are any other questions? Doesn't look like it at the moment. But please raise any in the future if you have them on the chat, or email me afterwards.
So sorry, I just noticed Nick had raised a chat comment around the M62, and just wondered if you wanted to expand on that. So it seems quite interesting.
Yeah, it's just a couple of things that are coming up on the smart motorway scheme is that when you talk about what point the decision needs to be made. So over the Pennines, there's a long section where the current diversion routes are probably not suitable for HGVs, or not as suitable for HGVs. And therefore it may dictate the method of construction, as in what traffic management arrangement, and really it should be dealt with. Well, we're dealing with it now, but I'm just saying it. You can see that there are other constraints that may actually dictate things, and we need to address them early.
Yeah, I mean, I'm familiar with that very familiar with that section of motorway, and yeah, absolutely. I mean, that should be sort of a key decision right from the outset, shouldn't it, as to how you're going to deal with traffic in that area.
Yes. So do you design the gantries to be gantries such that they only go over one carriageway, so that you do contraflow, blah blah blah. Yeah, as an example. So you can minimise the closures. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what we're looking at. It's a good
That's
example.
No, it is a good example. Thank you, Nick. That's useful.
Could I do one point about effective communication, please? Because the difficulty I've got is with risk management and having project-wise all of the other things about BIM, visualization, GIS. We need a common language. So I'm sort of saying applying lean would be a very good idea to actually have within our community how we effectively record decisions, how they're actually managed in the process, and how they're sort of safeguarded. The problem that we've got is if we have a very serious design flaw or a problem, it's going to be find the evidence of how did you actually get to your risk conclusion, especially if you then revert back to a design and build and they go back a couple of stages in design. That's the bit that actually worries me, is that we're reliant on design engineers to have good records and tagging, signposting, metadata, and they're not doing that effectively, unfortunately.
Okay. I agree, common language and the principles of lean, we could definitely areas to look into. And I suspect a lot of the work Ian's been doing may help sort of bring all this together under one format. Okay. Well, thank you all for listening and supporting us with our task group. All the comments you raised in our last meeting 3 months ago, we fed back into this as well. So it's all been a big team effort. So thank you all. And I'll hand back to you, Doug.
Okay, thank you, Terry. I will now tee up the next, well, assuming there's no further questions, I will tee up the next presentation. So if you bear with me a second. Okay, hopefully that's come through.
Yes, Doug.
Okay, right, thank you. So if I could introduce Chris G, who is the head of utility diversions with Highways England, and he's going to talk about improving stats management. So, okay, over to you, Chris. Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you, Doug. Cheers. And good morning, everyone. Yeah, I'm Chris G. I joined Highways England 8 months ago in a new role for the company, and I'm new to the organisation as well. I've spoken to 1 or 2 of you in that time, and really early on after joining, Mark Lamport got in touch and asked if just to understand a little bit about Highways England's approach to engaging with utility companies and what my sort of remit is. So happy to field questions at the end. I'm just going to say a little bit about what the utility challenge looks like, where I sit in the organisation, and what I think are some of the opportunities for us all in terms of how we engage with them and deliver a better service. And the key word there on that opening slide is the word enhanced, because obviously we're all having multiple engagements with the utility companies all the time across a number of our projects. And all I'm looking to do is sort of complement that to one side by sharing our national programme, which is our primary remit. But I'm actually going to talk a little bit more about some of the other issues and opportunities. Doug, I don't know if you can just jump onto the next slide, please. Thanks. So what's our problem with our utility friends? And they are our friends, and it must be stressed that, although we don't always treat them as such, and they don't always help us quite as we would like as well. So firstly, they're busy doing their own portfolio of work, as you know, and that those figures in the red across the top, it's just a quick bit of research I did off the internet in terms of what they're busy doing in their own capital programs of work, heavily regulated. So yes, we've got a large roads program to deliver in the next 5 years and beyond. But actually, we are slightly dwarfed by what they're all busy doing. And that is where it maybe creates a little bit of the tension, perhaps. We've got sort of usual sort of assumptions that they're sometimes quite difficult to engage with. It's difficult to know who's who in their organisations. And there's some challenges about some of the conversations that we have with them about their sort of working practices and how they build up their cost estimates and the like. We are looking to be spending, certainly in RIS2, upward of £600 million worth of work that we need to do with the utility companies to either move their assets protect them or requisition new supplies. And we are slightly in a bit of an arms race because they've got finite resource to do that. There's finite resource out there. HS2 are beating a path to their door, which is where I came from, by the way. Network Rail are beating a path to their door. Or we're all going out to the sort of contestable market to actually do the works for them ourselves. Obviously, Heathrow were beating a path to their door, a bit less so now. Their work is often critical path. We know that. There's issues about how we understand how they build up their costs. We don't engage them as a strategic partner, and I think that's quite critical. They like to be seen to be a partner. They don't like to be seen to be a part of our supply chain. My role is really trying to elevate their status in our sector as much as we know they've got to help us get better. And so primarily, we don't forward share our program with them. And that's my primary function, is to actually take our sort of 5-year program and say, roll it up nationally and go, there you go, Mr. Utility Company or Mrs. Here's our program of work that we need you to do for us, please. And actually, there's a spectrum of behaviours out there. None of this is new, I'm sure. The more mature ones actually do get it. So the head of one of the developer services said to me a number of years ago, water running down the road is always my fault. Even if someone else has hit it, or they can put up a legitimate defence to say, well, the reason why this road programme is late is because we told the road programme, the project, this is how you get us to move an asset, and we don't then follow that. So they've got a legitimate defence, but actually they know they don't want to be on the 6 o'clock news explaining why our roads programme is late and they're in the limelight. We are making their life more difficult by putting assets, burying them under roads, and we're interrupting their customers' supplies by getting them to move assets they weren't planning on moving. They have to contribute to the costs of some of this work. And there's a resource challenge, as I said. So that's a little bit about historically why we struggle to engage with them. Doug, are you able to go on to the next slide? Thanks. So where do I sit? Well, I sit. Oh, you could just go back. Thanks. Perfect. So I sit in that. No problem. Thank you. I sit in that box near the top. These aren't lines of reporting. This is my understanding a little bit about where I sit in the organisation. Probably needs a bit of a refresh. But the key thing is here, and I said right at the beginning about enhancing our relationship with them, because we've already got one. And the lines across the bottom where there's an 8 is all of the conversations that's going on by all of us at the moment in delivering programs of work in operations or major projects. And that's fine, that's great. We can crack on with requisitioning C4s, understanding where their assets are, how we're going to do new supplies, how we're going to get assets moved, etc., etc. That's fine. I'm here to take a rolled up national program look and share that with the sort of key utility companies. As I mentioned, I'm in a team of 1 for Highways England, so I'm only going to target the sort of 10 or 12 top utilities and share our program with them. And this should really help us, firstly, because what it will do is give them a forward view so they can see what we're planning and what we're going to need them to do for us. So they can then identify, right, we now know the scope of work that we may have to get involved with delivering and help Highways England and the whole community be a success. What it'll also do is just highlight some of the planning challenges, if I could put it like that. So I've already had one gas company come to us and say, we can't divert a high pressure gas main twice in the same 12-month window because you've got a RIP project and you've got a smart motorway scheme. or Lower Thames, for example, are going to affect it. We simply can't undertake that sort of operational risk. Great, that at least helps us to understand, and we've got time then to plan, okay, well, which one are we going to do first and how we're going to sequence our program. What it'll also help us do, or this is my expectation, is they will turn around and say, well, you can't have outages on 33 kV circuits. You can't have a whole bulk of them in 2024. Because we simply haven't got enough resource to do all of those switching of those circuits at the same time. And so, okay, what can we do about that then? Can we resequence our program? Could we look at bringing in some more resource? How could we ring fence some resource in order to protect our program? So opportunities for those sort of conversations are starting. And what it'll also do as well is they can see if they've got their own capital program at work, as I mentioned at the beginning, and they can see, oh, we've got a smart motorway scheme happening in 3 years' time in this area. Let's see how we can ensure that we're doing our design in conjunction with Highways England's design. So we're not doing rework or redesigning work once it emerges too late in the day, in the program. And there's a lot of other opportunities as well that we can look at about how we do better cost estimating, how we can tackle some of the issues about working out on site together and so on. And I know that there are conversations already going on to tackle some of this. And I'm not necessarily looking to sort of bring all of those together, but certainly I'm trying to understand, well, where are the initiatives, who's looking after some of these initiatives, and how can we maybe make sure it's a little bit more coordinated. What I'm also seeking to do is, and this is, no, the company hasn't asked me to do this, but this was just my thinking, is what tends to happen when things are going wrong with a utility company, sort of typical behavior is it's all going wrong. It goes up the food chain to some program director somewhere who says, oh, I remember I used to work with someone who's now in that utility company, rings them up, effectively it's a cold call. Let's have a conversation. Views are exchanged, the issue gets resolved, and then everybody goes away again. And that might not be the most optimum way for two large organizations to have a mature relationship, if I could put it like that. So I'm thinking about trying to identify people in the sort of senior part of Highways England as a sort of ultimate relationship holder with some of the key utility exec people, and once a year, once every 6 months, identifying who those people are and sort of putting them together, give them a briefing, obviously, just make sure the channels of communication are open. The utility company's imperatives are quite different to ours. We do know that, as I said earlier, we're making their life more difficult. They're legally compelled to do work for us that they didn't really want to do, which I get. So that's a little bit about where I sit and what we're trying to do. Doug, if you could just move on to the last slide. Thank you. So I've started talking to about 10 of the utilities. So people like National Grid, for example, obviously they're national, and some of the more regional, larger utility companies. I'm trying to share our program. We don't have a detailed program where I could roll everything up and say, for example, there you go, Southern Water. That's everything from our smart motorways, RIP, SIP, and everything operations are doing. Here you go. This is your complete workbook for the next 5 years from us, which is simply not at that place yet. So what I'm doing at the moment is effectively sharing what you can see on the screen on the right, which is a sort of national program, just as a Gantt chart showing when we're looking to start and finish sections of smart motorway and all the rest of our projects that we've talked about. They're keen to receive this, as I've mentioned. And what I'm trying to encourage stroke do with them is hold their feet to the fire a little bit by saying, well, what are you going to do with this knowledge? This isn't just a cozy fireside chat. I'm actually expecting you to come back with some quality inputs, and actually you come back with some suggestions about how we can make things better. We've been talking about COVID-19, no surprise. They've had to completely prioritise their own works. And so there's been a stepping away from supporting our projects that's got quite a bit better now. I'm trying to understand what their organisational setup is like. There's some work that we can do in terms of opportunities. So I'm looking to do some stuff as well as just share a program. We tend to contract from a blank sheet of paper every time we have a large scheme that has a DCO. So we'll go to them and say, we need you to do some design work for us. Let's sign up to a design agreement. We need you to go and do some long lead procurement. Let's sign up to one of those. We need you to do some construction works, etc., etc. And we potentially, I haven't got to the bottom of this, slightly reinvent the wheel. So one of my key things is to try and understand, well, how can we requisition a more enhanced design service? We certainly can't rely on just going to a developer services group and saying, give me a C3, give me a C4, and their designers are sort of sat in a bit of a silo. We need them to be a bit closer to us. Now, got to be very careful here. That is quite a big topic. Someone said to me not long after I've been here, you can't boil the ocean. So there's some aspiration to start to look at this as an opportunity. There's lots of health and safety things we can do. We've talked about this before, and I know I've had one or two conversations with some of you. I think we all know that their asset knowledge is a little bit suboptimal, if I can be generous. And some of them would admit that. And we know we have some challenges around service strikes and the like that we've talked about before. That's a complicated challenge. We know that, and there's multiple reasons why. I think the utilities can help us improve that situation. So, little case in point, Cadent Gas, for example, have a plant protection team. When I was at HS2, they came in and did a presentation to a range of people, project managers, people out on construction sites, supply chain, and so on, to just explain these are some of the challenges around working in the proximity of a high pressure gas main, and the do's and don'ts, and what happens when it goes wrong, and why they need so much space when they then do their own diversionary works, etc. Apparently it was really good. They did it 3 times. When I was at HS2, I missed all 3. I'm talking to Cadent Gas to say, well, come on, can come and do it for us. Tailor the conversation as appropriate. So I'm looking to get a pilot set up, and actually I'm talking to Western Power to say, well, hang on, why don't you come and offer something similar? Anglian Water, same conversation again, and so on. We've got some contractual challenges about how we go into bat with utility companies. And I think I'm going to sort of stop there, really, because there's a lot more I could say. So I'm aware Liz is coming next, so I'll just briefly throw it open to any questions. So Pav, you've got your hand in the air. Did you want to ask a question, but be gentle?
I think Pav's hand had been up in the air for quite a while, actually.
So Liz.
But I do have a question about this. I work on the LTC project, and what we're finding is that the designers don't have the knowledge. So the normal highway structures and the other designers don't have the engineering knowledge associated with statutory undertakers' equipment. And there needs to be some sort of, let's say, best practice or training module developed so that we communicate how far people need to be away from the assets, the vibration of assets, water movement, the basic engineering constraints that the national users sort of say, okay, stay this far away from our asset, and then when you get this close, you need to do X, Y, and Z.
Yeah, so you're talking about construction activities, so how close you can do piling and so on. They all individually publish that sort of guidance, but it is quite fragmented. I agree. So yes, that's a valid note. I'll make a note of that. Thank you. I'm not saying we can fix that in the next 5 weeks, but yeah, thanks. That's a good point. Liz, did you have a question?
Yeah, yes, I did. It's similar to Pav's really, and I guess it's quite specific as well in terms of the RDP contracts. where we certainly the ones we're on, we've been appointed as agent by Highways England for managing the statutory utilities. And previously that has not been the case for us on major projects. And our experience of being at a bit of an arm's distance has not been amazing with the behaviours, I guess, of some of the staff. So, you know, turning up, not wanting to do induction, not wanting to partake in drug and alcohol testing and all that sort of site health and safety process, as well as some of the bits and pieces that the lack of understanding that Pav has mentioned around the sort of engineering safety constraints that site team members sometimes don't fully understand. And I guess I feel like we need to somehow develop what I need to be clear is what is Highways England's expectations, if you like, of how we can try as principal contractors to help manage stats undertakers when they turn up, because it can be really tricky, and we're experiencing problems already at M42 with some of this.
Well, it's a totally legitimate concern, and I've seen it many times here and previously. So I totally understand about not signing up to drugs and alcohol and site inductions and the rest. There is some work going on. So there are some folks in major projects in RIP who are utilities experts supporting the RIP program of work. And one member of that team is busy writing a memo of understanding about utilities and their behaviours on site and how it all fits together under the sort of CDM principles of working, you know, next to one another, making areas specific CDM areas solely for that utility company, and what the process and mechanics of that looks like. That's going through our legal team at the moment, I believe, to look at, okay, does that sort of stand up? So there is some work, as I mentioned earlier, there's quite a few initiatives out there already in play. Might be worth talking to the RIP Utilities team if you haven't met them already, or touch base with me afterwards.
I'll drop you an email. That'd be perfect.
Happy to support. Appreciate time's ticking on, so I'll probably make this the last one, and I'm happy to sort of field questions afterwards. Paul Brown, I see you have your hand up. And you're mute. Or you put your hand down. Okay, Paul might not have a question. In which case,
sorry, I was talking to myself. Juvenile error. This was just a mirror to Liz's point regarding site works. Contractors are not necessarily complying with what the contractors would like them to do, but during the design phase, if we're principal designer on the project, we still need to have some evidence that as designers on the scheme, the stats are doing what they should be doing. So looking to get compliant or evidence of compliance with CDM regs and some sort of acknowledgement that there's a principal designer involved there to control design processes from the stats is as much a challenge as it is to get them to comply with stuff when they come on site.
It's quite a challenge on multiple layers, and it was a massive problem on HS2 because the utilities would be out designing their bit, the main works contractors designing the railway, and we just couldn't get the two in a room to actually engage properly. And so effectively we had to act like the sort of parent with two unruly sets of school children and sort of get them in the room and lay down the law slightly and run a proper design coordination function in order to at least fulfill a CDM obligation. So I'm aware it is a challenge and there's no easy fix as such.
I think generally everybody who does the CDM advisor role or organisation that operates as a principal designer on this call would more than happily sit in a room with the designers issues if only we could get them there.
Well, absolutely, that is half the challenge. They don't want to stick their head above the parapet. Hence my point at the beginning about calling them partners. It just helps elevate their status. They don't like to feel like we're pointing a finger at them, telling them what to do, which is what we are doing. It's a way of how do we get them to do that without making them feel like that. So I'm not trying to play games with them, because we actually do need them to support, and they've got their assets that they have to protect, and we've got obligations to treat them in a fair way. So
yeah, I think you're absolutely right on that, Chris. I think we need to get them in as partners and work collaboratively with them from as early as possible, as soon as we know we're going somewhere.
And Pav mentioned LTC. So LTC are busy trying to get design agreements in play with some of those key utility companies. And so my question to the team putting those agreements together is, well, can we just rub out the word LTC on the agreement and just put Highways England, and then off we go? There's probably multiple challenges around even doing something as simple as that. But that would certainly, for me, be a work towards aspiration. And then the conversation needs to be with utility companies. Right, can I have some of your design team actually sat in our offices, actually give service, please? And while you're at it, can you bring some of your cost engineers and maybe some of your planners, in order to get them a lot closer? That's the sort of work towards. But that's, some of the things I think we ought to be doing with them. I'm going to stop there, because we could probably talk about our utility friends for quite a while. So if there's any other questions, let me know outside of this. Happy to field them. And I'm going to hand back to Doug. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Chris. That fascinating discussion, and again raised lots of questions. One or two on the chat as well, which will feed back. So at this point, it's which links very nicely, segues to the work that Liz has been delivering in terms of updating the Raising the Bar 9 service avoidance. A sort of question to Liz: do you want me to bring the document up, or are you happy just to speak? How do you want to play it?
I'm happy. If we're short for time, it's fine. I don't mind just giving a bit of an overview. And I know you've sent the document out, and basically it's just a plea from the design community to have a look at that document if you've not already, and give me some feedback. So just a little bit of background so that I'm sure you're all aware. We've within Highways England now, there is a new type of document called the Common Intent document, and there is a 2-page Common Intent document on service avoidance. And this Raising the Bar document sits underneath that and gives a bit more detailed guidance about some of the things that people should be doing, principal contractors and designers. I would like to say that this document has a lot more information in and a lot more guidance than the previous version did. There is more of a focus on the design element, and hence why I really need your guys' help to make sure I've got absolutely, without making it a massive document, that I've actually got all the bits and pieces in here that need to be in here. So there is a lot more detail in about the design process, about capturing data, about the drawings that are provided, about designing for maintenance, prep works, protection of services, etc., etc. So I really would appreciate some feedback from the design community, but just bear in mind, and I'm more than happy to take some comments and put them in, but I don't want the document to end up being like 30 or 40 pages. So if you can be concise in your comments, that would be really, really good. And I guess in terms of timescale, yeah, I need comments as quickly as possible, because we're under a bit of pressure from the supply chain safety leadership group within Highways England to actually get this new Raising the Bar published. So if you're able to get me something by next week, that would be really good. So I can see Doug's got his hand up.
Yeah, I mean, I'd look at the document. We've already covered one or two points I'd raise around the principal designer, because that's always a difficulty, and I know we've touched on that on the previous discussion, and then around sort of capture of as-built information. Seems to be a inconsistency in terms of how if particularly around obviously for diversions, who's responsible for doing that, who who provides that information? Is it properly GPSed, etc.? You know, if there could be something in there, because I've asked this question on one or two schemes, and it's been, well, it's, you know, it's the third party contractor is delivering it, and, well, you know, are you picking up the as-built information? You know, it's advanced diversion works. Do we know exactly where it is? So it potentially impacts on the Highways England design. So there seems to be a bit of inconsistency on the ground in terms of how that information is captured, and this big question mark about the principal designer and who it is. And I know there's been some issues on the Yorkshire North East schemes where you know, a site within the main Highways England site has been handed over to effectively a different principal designer, and there's been okay, it was an internal procedure, but there was sort of inconsistent in terms of how that had happened, and were the two PDs organisations talking to each other properly?
Yeah, and I'm quite interested maybe in comments around data capture, because certainly what I can see from my experience on site is we divert a cable or something, is we've done something, we've put something in, and then we go back, we know it's there, but we haven't updated the drawings for the site, and we've got on to the next thing, and we hit the cable we've just diverted. Because,
and I've just raised a number of NCRs for exactly that reason. Well, not that they've hit the cable, but the fact of not updating construction issue drawings.
No. Yeah, I think maybe that section could be a bit stronger. So I will look at that. If anyone's got some really good phraseology, that would be appreciated.
I think there's a question from Roger.
Yeah, it's just a quick sort of comment, really. I'm glad it's called utility avoidance, and sort of the thing I'm seeing at the moment, or over the recent few months anyway, is the hitting, striking, damaging, whatever we do with uncharted services. So a lot of the stuff I've seen coming out fairly recently is very heavily focused on finding what we know. But the other part that we know for sure on any project, any scheme we're going to do, there will be uncharted live cables. And I just feel a lot of the emphasis on the documentation doesn't cover that in a way that it maybe ought to, and bring that a bit higher up the list, and don't just say, oh, well, we're going to find them and it'll be there. That's kind of ducking the issue, and the thing that is going to really damage and hurt somebody is the live HV cable that is uncharted. And there's been a few instances, certainly in the last few months, of not injuries, but we've certainly been striking uncharted cables. The utility folks come out, they do their thing, they pot end it, but whether there is any follow-up record on this. And I think some of the guidance documents maybe should have a bit more emphasis on how you deal with the uncharted unknown that we are always going to find. So it's not really it's that 5% that we have on every project. Probably no one on the call can say they've never done one and never found it in the process. They've never found an uncharted cable, but I'll just sort of see that as a sort of weak link in it all at the moment.
Okay. Anyone else got any questions or comments? I see some comments in the chat. So yeah, I agree, removal of redundant equipment needs to be standard practice. But yeah, I mean, I think we all recognise that sometimes it's towards the end of projects and contracts that things that maybe we would do normally sometimes get missed. And yeah, the cost element, I would agree with that.
Is it worth Nick expanding on his comment around pass 1 to 8?
Yeah. Nick, you might be talking to yourself.
He's on. Well, Nick's on mute. Don't know. Okay. Well, maybe we'll follow that up afterwards. Unless there's anything else, Liz. Thank you very much. And we'll try and get obviously, as you say, feedback with as soon as possible within the week.
Yes, please. Yeah.
I'm back.
Oh, you're back. There you go.
Somebody rang me with an urgent message, that was all. This is the terrible thing about Teams meetings. People can still ring you. What was the question? Sorry.
Could you expand on your comment around PAS 128? I think
Sorry,
it
I
was.
thought PAS 128 and PAS 256 cover the level of surveys you should do at different grades. And also, one of the issues, I certainly know this within the utility frameworks, never mind working for Highways England, is they have a lot of reactive maintenance. And one of the issues was in the utility frameworks was when they're doing emergency repairs, they actually can't comply with the standards because they've got to go in and do the repair. So they don't do the GPR.
Okay.
But the point is that it talks about levels of survey and GPR is included in there, and we should be doing GPR and VACX, etc., once we know where things are.
Okay.
Presumably, Nick, you're thinking we should be doing GPR during pre-construction, during the design phase, right early on. Yeah,
should be,
categorically on everywhere where we're going in.
Yeah.
Well, at least the high risk areas, yeah. You could argue that you should be doing it on the side roads, but in the green field, you might argue you don't need to do it at that point.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you for those comments. Thank you, Liz. Another comment from Rob.
I'm trying to think who it was who mentioned about the the models and 3D models and that sort of thing not being 100% accurate. And so I think if you like, the defences we have from PAS 128 of CAT scans, hand dig, and GPR again are not 100% in terms of the detecting what's in the ground, and a lot of it's about the quality of the equipment and the experience of the operator. It isn't it isn't a 100% situation just because we add GPR into the mix, but it is a good set of defences to try and minimise the number of strikes that we have.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Often when I've gotten involved looking at actual service strikes, you'll find that processes are good. It's not for lack of process and procedure that things go wrong. It's to do with experience and actually how processes are implemented on site, how people are using survey equipment and how people are doing the actual work. And for me, there is always this behavioural element that we need to capture as well.
Agreed. There's good stuff these days, though, with some of the scanners or just the CAT scanners now. At least they record what they've done.
Yeah.
So therefore, you have a sense of responsibility on the individual, not to waft it around, but to use it properly. And I think that was a great introduction 3-4 years ago.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, it's quite powerful to be able to present somebody with that information saying, well, you've used this for 3 seconds and you think that's adequate for this size area.
And then, this is your life.
Yeah.
Doug, I'm very conscious that we have 15 minutes left and we've still got some presentations. Thank you, Liz. And if people have comments, please can they forward them to Liz as quickly as possible?
Okay, thank you. Yes, I will now move us on to the PD working group task and finish groups. So I've got the presentation that Rob has very kindly provided around Jacob's safety alert and lessons learned process. So hopefully that's come through now. And over to you, Rob.
Yeah, thank you very much, Doug. Hello, everybody. So this was actually, I was inspired into this actually by Tim Goddard, who produced a sort of a similar sort of description of how Arcadis approached the safety alert process. So I'm sort of opening myself up to criticism and barracking. So this is really just a look at the alert process, and then just I suppose a bit of a surprise finish for our discussion. So if we go to the next slide, please, Doug. So I guess everybody in the supply chain, including those on the call, we get the alerts by an email. So sometimes it's from a project team, and sometimes it's from the National Health and Safety team, and that's fine. Come through loud and clear. This particular one, this is what they look like. This is HEI 169, was about a mobile light tower being towed whilst extended, and then striking a bridge. And fortunately, no one was harmed. Next slide, please, Doug. We then receive or obliged to send back a safety alert response sheet, or this is what I'm tasked with anybody. So if others aren't, I'd want to know why. And this ends up being about 5 pages, which I then sort of combine into a PDF and send back. But I think the question here is this the best way to achieve what is required for what is a quite a quick process for getting the information out? But anyway, this is what we do. Next slide, please, Doug. So when we receive an alert, what we've been trying to do, and a lot of this is authored by me, but I try and provoke some thinking around the background to what the alerts might be. And so that's, for instance, root cause inevitably does not go far enough up the chain of command to understand why the culture in a company might find substandard behaviours acceptable. And also send messages to our design teams, because this is invariably within our design community, to say what else can they do? Is there anything we can do within the context of the current construction environment that we're in? A lot of times we find it's quite challenging to do anything different. But it remains to be seen that I see this as one small part of a jigsaw of striving to think of things that we can do that are different, trying to change things, at least being alert to the issue, so that we have some sympathy in our design work. This gets wrapped into the PDF with the alert response sheet and sent back to HE. So next slide, please. So part of I suppose it's like sort of a bit of a sort of a sideline thing of mine that I've realised I've become interested in is what about analyses and what about analysis and trends. So next slide, please, Doug. And as part of tracking the alerts, just making sure we had a bit of a log. We keep an Excel spreadsheet with a few dates in it to show when we receive things and when we sent them. But also I started to look at the categories in which the alerts might fall into. So some alerts have, I feel, more than one category, and this is where I sort of throw myself up to criticism for how superficial the selection of these categories might be. But what I have done is to choose the categories. I've looked at the HC major statistics for fatal and serious incidents, such as things like falls from height, to help with the choice of categories. Crossrail, I have 9 categories of serious of areas they want to focus on to minimise harm. And then Jacobs, so we've got our own what we call critical risk areas, which have some overlap. So there was it's a reasonable stab at a series of categories that are affecting us at the moment. So then we come on to the last slide, which is taking all these stats and with the big caveat that they're simple and subjective, they help with the overall picture. It's a qualitative analysis. The population is small. There's not thousands and thousands of alerts. And certainly there's some improvements can be made, perhaps linking the categories more to PAS 1192, which would tidy things up a bit. But just looking down this graph, which I trying to make sense of a spreadsheet of stats is, I mean, after 10 lines, I'm sort of going blind. So having a picture of some kind just helps you interpret it a further step forward. And one thing that leaps out here, and this is where certainly a test is required, but work activity, issue or behavior that might be behind the issue with the safety alert or the incident described in the safety alert leaps out as a more common cause than anything else from the safety alerts we get. So again, as I say, this is not tested by any means, but I mean, even if we apply some margins of error, the behavioural issue does leap out. And then you've got equipment issue, so that's some part of equipment failing, and then also you've got plant-person conflicts. And then this is also important, and it's not, and this is, I think it's important to state that the efforts we put in design for all the other categories or related to the other categories are still essential. So, you know, it's by no means that we should focus on one thing in isolation of everything else. But I think it's interesting about the behavioural result that might influence how we think about our design. You know, how our designs are going to be interpreted on site. Are we depicting our designs? Are we interpreting our designs in such a way that everybody on site can understand them, no matter how or which way the information is extracted from the model? And that's my talk about safety alerts. Is there anything on the chat?
Yeah, Richard, I've asked a silly question. Who asks for this safety alert response sheet? Is that an internal thing?
So I'm getting that from our highways. The main Highways England project I'm working on is the A12 to A120 widening with Steve Elderkin, and that's the health safety manager there is Phil Winogo, but I get it from the project team.
Okay,
that seems to be an internal HE thing required.
That's a local thing with Phil. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Could I?
Sorry, there's a few more.
Yeah, I mean, in just looking at your categories, our categories similar, quite similar, and I suppose that our big finding is around and probably it's comparable is failure with RAMs to comply with RAMs. So I suppose that's behaviour, you know, sort of equipment. So the biggest proportion of our findings, and again, it is a bit subjective because of the information we get, does seem to be around that sort of behaviours. Are we complying with RAMs? Are they adequate? Are they being complied with? You know, is there a stop? I mean, we've had an issue recently on a job. You know, potentially there should have been a stop work notice issued, or people should have stopped work and they didn't. They carried on even though the RAMs weren't applicable, or the operation had changed. So yeah, again, it's sort of behaviours, isn't it? So I think that does seem to the biggest area, certainly from the evidence that we've gleaned from the safety alerts that are issued.
I think that's the headline issue, or there's a headline factor, let's say, because you know, people aren't automatons. So with work processes and safe systems of work, there's a collection of attributes to the activities being carried out, and that includes things like training, your discipline, your diligence, but it also includes things like effective supervision as well, and control, and you know, whether that's sufficient. So there are several overlapping features, I think, to behaviour, and so it isn't just. I don't think it's just one feature.
No, I think I agree. Yeah. Sort of when the investigation was undertaken on this particular incident, yes, I mean, there was a supervision issue. There was there were a number of other contributory factors which all led to the particular instance. And that, as I say, that does seem to be a common thread. I mean, yes, you can break it down, and there are other issues in there as well. And I think that's probably potential root cause is quite difficult to actually determine in a lot of instances, because there are many issues. Or contributory factors, as you say. I noticed Pav has got his hand up.
Yeah.
Could I just ask, we have the safety alerts as a alert when the event happens to start, to make other people aware. We don't have a post-event awareness or review. So I'm just looking at the root behind the statistics actually being wrong, or not effective. So we were looking at changing the format of the safety alerts to actually have a post-review feedback form or something like that. And Highways England to actually have a section in there that looks at principal designer issues or root cause issues in design. Has anything happened with that, please?
So I don't know whether anybody from HE can answer that. I think the reason why I've ended up with graph and the data and that sort of thing is when I made a sort of casual inquiry about whether anything was being done with the data, effectively it was a what or a no, or the population is too small, and I thought that wasn't good enough. So I've started to do something myself, and I think it's it's instructive, reassuring on some sides, but also and not so much cause for concern, but something that we all have to own. We all have to own this, and try and make sure our projects are as safe as possible. I think Pav, I've probably got mission creep on the answer to your question, but I think more could be made of the safety alerts section of the hub website.
Mr. Merry's on the call. He may be able to answer this because it's one of his alerts.
Pav, to answer your question, there is a two-stage alert process that we have. It isn't working as well as we would like. So there is a mechanism, there is a structure, a process for action follow-up. But yeah, there is a lot of room for improvement to make that work better in terms of this is the awareness, this has happened. So the tower light one is a good one. That went out. My hope is, as it happened on one of our schemes in the programme, that we will be able to do a follow-up, and we'll be working with the delivery partners to have something to follow up and say, well, actually, this was an engineering solution in terms of the light unit itself. Notice on the chat there's a question about that tower light one being designed out and not having common standards. There are actually common standards for lighting units, and this one met that standard. The design out, my view on this one, is about planning and sequencing the work. The work that was being done, did it really need to be done at night? Did we need if it was done in the daytime, you wouldn't have a lighting rig to hit the bridge. But yeah, there is some challenge still to be addressed on our lessons learnt.
Thomas, it's Nick Boyle. The comment on the tower light was that you shouldn't be able to move the tower light with it erected 5 meters in the air.
Yeah.
Unless somebody breaks the rules and tries to drag it.
Yeah. And there's a standard for that, and this tower light had an interlock feature that should have prevented that, but it didn't.
Yeah, I'd echo Tom's point about that. I was just about to say that, but I think it is a good point, Nick, of course. But there was actually a safety feature in there that was meant to avoid this happening. It's very unfortunate.
Just conscious of time.
Thank you, Doug.
I think Liz has got a hand up. If it's a quick
well,
one, Liz.
I think Tom has covered my point actually, was that analyze with safety alerts like this is really difficult from a different view, because Tom just made, which is that why are we doing the works on nights? Isn't it actually the best design solution is about trying to factor out the use of tower lights in the first place? So I think it's really difficult, even if you've got a second stage safety alert, to actually do this sort of analysis and get what you like, what is valuable out the other end of it, if you see what I mean. I think you've got to think really quite broadly about it. It's not even having the root cause of the actual incident. Often people are not going back far enough to even consider design and work sequencing, because and I speak as a safety professional, but safety advisors are very focused on site on what is happening on that construction site at the construction time. They don't go back along the line.
And I think that's something we've been flagging up for a while in terms of getting that designer input into investigations to identify what that root cause was. And it's this two-stage. We're not getting the second stage to say, well, actually, part of the root cause is the fact that why we were building it at night and what were the designers thinking about, and etc. Again, so just conscious of time. So I'm not going to sort of close the discussion because it's very good, but. We just had a couple of final items on in terms of task and finish groups. I don't know if Jim Todd is still on the call. For a quick update on constructability with the Temporary Works Forum.
Yeah, I'm here. Can everybody hear us okay?
Yeah, coming through. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So the Temporary Works Forum produced a draft document at the beginning of May, which it's issued to its members, and it gave them until middle of June to make comment. We've received probably comments from a dozen people, and we are planning on going through those in the near future with a view to incorporating them if we think it's worthwhile, and then publishing the document in August. So this will be the Temporary Works Forum's sort of guide or view on constructability. So stages when it would benefit, looking at constructability and what to look at, and a few sort of pointers. So that's my update.
Okay, thank you, Jimmy. Is there a plan? I know you spoke last time to develop things going after the launch in August. Are you still thinking of that? Is that still in the plan?
Yeah, I think what we'll do, unfortunately, work keeps on taking over life. When we've got time, what we'll do is then hopefully this will generate a bit of discussion within the Temporary Works sort of community and the members of the organisation, and we'll get some feedback, and we will then look at doing another revision. This is kind of to get people talking about it, and then once they've decided what they actually want, we can then do a second revision, which I think will encompass more than the first draft has.
Okay, thank you, Jim. We did have one final item, which was RTB 26, but I think we've already covered that in item 3. So just very quickly, AOB, and I know Pav had some AOB he mentioned. Oh, quickly, Paul.
Yeah, just real quickie. Raising the bar 26. I understand there's going to be a specific working group set up. Just wondered if anybody's got an update on when that might be happening.
The short answer is no. I'm afraid not, Paul. As you've heard from the discussion earlier, the hub approach, and this is something that I'm supporting, is that the raising the bars will be continue to be developed by supply chain partners, not Highways England. Terry Meadows has taken on the task of developing the raising the bar 26 update, and I think once we've got the common intent document agreed and finalised, that's when I would expect a bit more to kick off. But I've got no other detail, Paul, I'm afraid.
That's all right. That's all right, Tom. That was just a straightforward inquiry, just to know if there is a timetable.
Yeah.
I imagine it's got to wait till common intent's out before we can start doing RTB 26. So.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks. Bye now.
Okay. Thanks for the update. Pav, did you want to quickly come in on the AOB re Wolverhampton? Are you still there, Pav?
Liz has got her hand up.
Oh no, I don't want my hand up. No, on my hand.
Yeah.
Sorry.
And Paul's got his hand up as well. Not sure what's happened to Pav. Is he?
Okay.
But Paul, I believe he also mentioned your name in terms of Wolverhampton.
Yeah, I've been on one of their sessions on this this research project the Wolverhampton University are doing into CDM. Seems to be led by architects and architects' perceptions. It's quite an interesting discussion, hearing how other people are looking at the CDM regs. There were some people on the call on Monday where we were talking about principal designer duties in particular. Very vociferous about the fact that with the design risk management schedules and things like that have got absolutely no place in relation to CDM, which I didn't expect to hear from anybody working in CDM, that there's absolutely no requirement anywhere in the world to show any record of having done any design risk management. The argument being that if you've got competent designers working on it, they know what they're doing and they know how to design stuff safely, and therefore you don't need to record what they're doing to do so. I'll leave you to make your own conclusions on that one. Yeah.
Okay. Right.
But yeah, interesting.
Okay, thank you, Paul. I'm very conscious of time. The next meeting is on the 10th of September. We haven't got one penciled in August, have we, Doug?
We haven't. I think it was like 16th, but yeah. I just wondered with the launch of the standards whether it was worth maybe putting it back a week towards the end of September after the launch, or what your thoughts were there. But
I think so, possibly, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Other than that, do you want a closing statement, Richard? Is that
Doug asked me an embarrassing question the other day, and it wasn't my PIN number. He said to me, "What's happening with you? What are you doing?" And I have shared with you previously that I am moving roles within HE. I'm going to be responsible, or not support, it's a better word than responsible, commercial procurement, in particular focusing on supply chain engagements and looking at that area. So that was muted, actually, believe it or not, last September. Things take a long time sometimes. And my replacement will be joining the business next week, Glyn Ford, and in due course he will join this meeting. Okay, so I'm not disappearing. I will still be participating and involved in this meeting as chair. Okay.
Well, thank you very much, Richard. Thanks for the update. Thank you for everybody attending. Thank you for the people, the contributors, and those who've put presentations together. If there's anything you'd like presenting at the next group meeting, please forward information. I've already got a number of suggestions, which I'll run past Richard shortly. And we'll get a set of minutes out. The meetings has been recorded, and we'll also get some responses to the meeting chat.
And most importantly, Doug, big thank you to you for all your tenacity in making sure that these things run smoothly and that we actually have an interesting and stimulating meeting, which this has been, as always. So thank you very much, Doug.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Okay.
Have,
Well,
thank you.
Have a safe day.
Bye.
Take care, Doug.
Bye, everybody.
Yeah, bye,
Thank you.
everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks, Doug.
Thank
Take
you.
care, everyone.
Yeah, bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye now.